You've heard of haunted churches, but have you ever heard of a choir that sang itself to death? Blithburgh Church in Suffolk, England, is a place of quiet beauty, but the wind that whispers through its stone arches carries a melody that won't let go. Built in the 12th century, this church has stood for nearly 900 years, its stone and timber holding more than just the weight of time. It holds the echoes of the past, including the haunting songs of its choir. The choir was once a symbol of hope, their voices rising like a prayer to the heavens. But in the late 1800s, something changed. The boys who sang in the choir began to vanish, disappearing one by one, without a trace. Some say the church itself is cursed, that the very stones have a memory of sorrow and loss. Others whisper of a ghostly choir that still sings at night, their voices echoing through the rafters like a lullaby from the grave. But why would a choir of children be cursed? What secret lies in the heart of Blithburgh Church? And why does the wind still carry their song, even after all these years? You've heard of haunted churches, but Blithburgh's is different. It's not just the walls that whisper, it's the echoes of a choir that never stopped singing. The church was built in the 1100s, a Norman structure with thick stone walls and a sense of timelessness. It's been a place of worship for centuries, but something changed in the 1500s. In 1559, the church was part of the dissolution of the monasteries. The monks were driven out, and the choir was disbanded. But the music didn't stop. Some say the choir was cursed by their last performance of final, haunting melody played as the monks were cast out. The music never faded, and neither did the voices. The villagers began to report strange occurrences, voices in the choir loft at night, a presence that felt both warm and cold, and a sound like 1,000 voices singing in unison. To this day, the choir lives on, not in the air, but in the hearts of those who listen. And if you ever find yourself near Blithburgh, you might just hear them, too. You remember the first time you heard the choir, didn't you? A soft, lilting melody, like wind through the pews, but it wasn't the organ, it was something else, something ancient, whispering through the stone. It was early spring, and the air was thick with the scent of rain and old wood. You sat in the third row, eyes on the altar, when the voices began, not from the children, but from the walls themselves. One morning, the priest said something strange about a boy who had been here once, a child from the village, who never left. He didn't say why, just that the choir had changed and the boy's voice was now part of it. You started to notice the cracks in the walls, the way the light seemed to bend when you walked through the aisles. And the scent, oh, the scent like burning incense and something older, something that had been buried for centuries. It was then you realized the choir wasn't just singing, it was remembering. And it had been waiting for someone to listen. You remember the hymns, don't you? The ones that echoed through the stone halls of Blithburgh, soft as a sigh. But one day, the choir vanished. Just like that. No warning, no trace. The last rehearsal was a quiet, somber affair. The boys sang with their usual grace, but there was a hush in the air, like the world had paused just to listen. When they disappeared, the villagers whispered of a ghostly presence, of voices in the dark that called them home. But no one could say where or why. To this day, the church still sings. But the voices are wrong. They're not the children's. They are older, sadder, and they never stop. And if you're ever in Blithburgh, don't walk the path behind the church at night. You will hear them, and they'll hear you back. I remember the first time I heard the choir. It was a Sunday morning, the air thick with the scent of old stone and damp wool. The organ began to play, but the voices were wrong, too high, too bright, like children laughing in the rafters. The priest looked up, his face pale, and whispered, "Not the children, not the children." He knew. He heard it too. That same sound, the same wrongness, every Sunday for years. Old Mrs. Tuck, who lived across the lane, swore she saw them little figures in the windows, dressed in white, their faces hidden behind lace. They'd wave and smile, but when she turned, they were gone. One evening, a young boy wandered too close and came back with his story. He said the choir didn't sing, they screamed, not in words, but in sound, like glass shattering in a storm. And then there were the letters, old, yellowed, written in trembling hands. They come for the ones who listen. They come for the ones who remember. That was the last one. No signature. You think it's a trick of the light, a trick of the mind, but the choir doesn't need to be heard to be felt. It lingers in the silence, in the cold of the stone, in the quiet of the morning. We started by asking the vicar about the choir. He said the boys were always quiet, but sometimes they'd vanish in the middle of a hymn, only to be found hours later, pale and shivering, claiming they'd been in a dream. The church records showed strange gaps, names missing from the choir rolls, no one ever confirming their absence. It was as if the boys had been erased from time itself. We dug into the local archives, and there it was, a newspaper clipping from 1958. It described a boy who vanished during a rehearsal, only to reappear days later, saying he'd been taken by the church's silent guardian. The vicar had a soft spot for the choir boys. He told us he'd often hear them singing in the night, their voices echoing through the stone walls, even when no one was there. We asked the townsfolk, and their stories were all different. Some said the choir was cursed, others claimed they were haunted by a spirit that took the boys to protect them from the world. In the end, we found no proof, only the weight of the past. But the church still sings, and sometimes, in the silence between the notes, you can hear the choir still waiting. You know, there's one thing that has never been explained, a single detail that haunts the whole story. It's like a missing piece of a puzzle that no one dares to piece together. Everywhere you look, there are whispers of the choir, of their voices still echoing through the stone. But no one can say for sure what exactly they were singing. Some say they were singing a hymn, others claim it was a lullaby. But there's one thing that's never been confirmed: what language they were using. They were singing in a language that no one recognized. A mix of Latin, Old English, and something else. It's like they were speaking to something that only the choir could hear. And the weirdest part? No one has ever found a single recording of that voice. Just echoes, and the feeling that someone, somewhere, is still singing in the dark. You've heard the tale of the choir, but what about the people who live here now? Some say the town still whispers about the children who vanished in the 1920s, and the ones who never came home. Old Mrs. Pritchard claims she saw a child's shoe in the choir loft last winter, just before the storm knocked out the power. She says it was too clean, too new, and too small for anyone in the town. Others say the children aren't ghosts at all, but lost souls trapped in the music. The choir's final note, always the same, echoes through the church like a warning, a lullaby, or a siren's call. And then there's the rumor that the church itself is alive, feeding on the voices. You've heard the stories, but have you ever wondered what if the choir was never real at all? You know, sometimes the hardest part of a mystery isn't the ghost, it's the silence. The silence that follows when the choir stops singing, and no one dares to ask why. The last recorded performance of the Blithburgh Choir was in 1956. The conductor, a stern man named Mr. Bellamy, said the voices just faded, like they'd been swallowed by the stones themselves. And then there's the question no one dares to ask. What if the music stopped because someone didn't want it to? What if the silence was a choice, not a curse? To this day, the church still holds its annual service, but the choir never returns. And the people who come? They come not to sing, but to remember the sound that once was and the silence that replaced it. You've heard the echoes of the choir, felt the weight of their song in the silence between notes. But what if the music never stopped? What if the voices still linger, waiting for the right moment to rise again? Sometimes the most terrifying things are the ones you can't see. A whisper in the rafters, a shadow that doesn't belong. The Blithburgh Church isn't just haunted, it's haunted by a memory that refuses to fade. But don't worry, we're not done yet. There's still more to tell, more stories that wait in the dark. Just remember, some places don't forget, and some songs never end. So, I'll leave you with this: if you ever hear a choir in the dead of night, don't turn it off. Sometimes the music is just beginning. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Fire TV Stick 4K streaming device. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. You've heard of the Baton Death March, but have you ever wondered what it sounds like? A place where the wind whispers of suffering and the earth remembers every step taken in desperation. This is Baton, a land where history is etched into the soil, where the silence is louder than any scream. The air carries the weight of 1,000 untold stories, waiting to be heard. Some say the wind carries the echoes of the fallen, that the land itself remembers the cries of those who were lost. But can a place hold a memory so deep it becomes a haunting? Today, we're not just visiting a place, we're stepping into a story that refuses to be forgotten. A story that haunts not just the land, but the hearts of those who listen. So, dear listener, what do you hear when you walk these grounds? The whisper of the wind, the echo of footsteps, or something far more silent and terrifying? You know, the Baton Death March wasn't just a march, it was a brutal betrayal. The Japanese, after capturing Baton, decided to take the American and Filipino prisoners on a forced march to a prisoner of war camp. It was a calculated move, a way to break their spirits before they even got there. The men were told it would be a short walk, just a few miles. But what they didn't know was that it was death sentence. The Japanese had no intention of giving them food, water, or shelter. They were being marched to their doom. The march was more than just a physical endurance test, it was a psychological one. The Japanese soldiers were armed, and they would shoot anyone who tried to resist or fall behind. It was a clear message: don't even think about surviving. And then, as the march stretched on, the men realized the truth. They weren't just being marched to a camp, they were being marched to death. And in the end, it was a march that claimed over 7,000 lives, men who had fought for their freedom, only to be stripped of it in the most cruel way. You know how sometimes the wind carries a whisper, like it's trying to tell you something you're not ready to hear? Well, that's what started it all, a whisper that wouldn't stop. Just before the silence began, they said it was just the wind, but the wind didn't sound like it was coming from anywhere. It was coming from the earth itself, like the land was trying to remember something it shouldn't. People in the village noticed it too. The animals started acting strange, birds flying in circles, dogs howling at nothing, and even the chickens refusing to lay eggs. Something was waking up, and it didn't want to be found. The elders told stories of the land remembering that it had a memory, and sometimes, when the world was silent, it would speak through the wind, through the trees, through the very ground beneath our feet. But the wind didn't stop, and neither did the silence. It grew heavier, like a blanket pulled over the world, and the whispers turned into something else entirely, something that could no longer be ignored. And so, the first signs of something terribly wrong began, not with a scream, but with a whisper and a silence that refused to be broken. You've heard the stories of the march, but what about the silence that followed? The soldiers who vanished, their voices swallowed by the earth, their fate lost in the chaos of war. Some say they were taken by the enemy, others believe they were buried in secret pits. But no one knows for sure. The truth is buried beneath the weight of decades. The march was a nightmare, but the silence that followed was worse. The survivors remember the screams, but the ones who disappeared, their voices were never heard again. Sometimes, the silence is louder than the screams. Sometimes, the truth is buried so deep, even the wind won't disturb it. Some survivors say they heard the sound of a child's laughter echoing through the jungle, not as a sign of hope, but as a cruel joke, a voice that never grew older, never stopped crying. Others recall the sound of boots on dry leaves, not marching, but stumbling like the dead trying to walk again, their feet dragging through the mud, leaving trails of silence in their wake. Some say the wind carries their whispers now, not in words, but in the sound of footsteps, the rustle of branches, the sudden hush that falls over the jungle as if it's holding its breath. And then there are the ones who say they never heard anything at all, that the silence was the most terrifying sound of all, a void where voices should have been. We dug deeper, piecing together fragments of the past. Letters, old maps, and whispered rumors led us to a place where time seemed to stand still. One file, dated 1942, described a hidden path through the jungle marked with a symbol that no one could explain. At the edge of the clearing, we found a rusted fence, its bars twisted as if in pain. It was the last known location of the march's final survivors. Strange symbols were carved into the wood like a silent message from the past, waiting to be understood. As we stood there, a wind picked up, carrying with it the faint sound of distant footsteps just like the ones from the old records. You know, there's one thing about the Baton Death March that still doesn't make sense. Not the suffering, not the brutality, but the silence. No one ever heard the screams, not even the soldiers. The Japanese records say the prisoners were marched in silence, like animals. No one dared to speak, for fear of the guards. But how could they not scream? The conditions were unimaginable. What's haunting about it all is that the silence never ended. It lingers in the stories, in the silence between words, in the places where the soldiers once walked and never spoke. So, what do you think? Was the silence a choice or a curse? And why do we still hear it, in the wind, in the trees, in the places where the truth was buried so deep it never came up again? Some say the wind that howls through the Baton jungle carries the whispers of the lost. Others insist it's the spirits of those who never made it home, still calling out for their families. In the towns near the march route, old folks will tell you the same story: a soldier, a mother, a lost child, each one's fate unknown, each one's name remembered in the quietest corners of the heart. A few believe the march itself is still alive in the land, a memory etched into the soil and the sky. You can almost hear it if you stand still and let the silence settle around you. And then there are the ones who think the march never really ended, that the ghosts still walk among us, waiting for someone to remember, to listen, to carry their story forward. Even now, decades later, the echoes of that march still haunt the bones of the land. You've heard the stories, but have you ever wondered what happened to those who didn't make it? Some say the earth remembers. The bodies were never counted. The names were never recorded. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. You think you know the story, but what if the truth is buried deeper than we ever imagined? Some say the land is still haunted by the unresolved pain of that day. Others say the silence is a reminder that some truths are too heavy to bear. But what if the silence is just the beginning? We tell the stories to remember, but sometimes the truth is too dark to carry. And sometimes the silence is the only thing left to say. What will you do when the story ends? You know, sometimes the silence is the loudest scream of all. Imagine standing where the wind has carried whispers for decades and hearing nothing but your own breath. These stories don't end with a grave or a name. They linger in the soil, in the air, in the bones of the land itself. They wait for someone to listen. So, as we leave this tale behind, remember, the past is never truly buried. It just waits for the right moment to rise again. And now, dear listeners, let's turn the page. There's more to uncover, more to feel, more to remember. You've heard of the Baskersville legend, but have you ever stood where the wind howls like a beast in the night? This place isn't just a house, it's a tomb of secrets, wrapped in shadow and silence. The Baskersville family once ruled this land with a mix of pride and madness. Their wealth built grand estates, but their bloodline was cursed by a tale older than the moor itself. This moor is more than just land, it's a character in its own right. It watches, it whispers, and it holds the weight of every tragedy that has ever happened here. And now, in the quiet of night, the legend lives on. The Hound is not just a story, it's a warning, a memory, and a ghost that still walks the moor, waiting for the next soul to step too close. Now, let's step back and look at the Baskersville family, those proud, brooding men with their dark, brooding eyes and that terrible, terrible hound. The name Baskersville was once a symbol of wealth, power, and a long line of landowners who ruled the moors with a fist of iron. But even the most powerful families have their secrets. The Baskervilles were no different. Their wealth came from land, but their legacy came from the hound, a creature of myth, born from fear and the darkest corners of the imagination. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Kindle Paperwhite e-reader. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. The first mention of the hound came from a man named Sir Charles Baskerville, who lived in the 1800s. He was the son of a wealthy baronet, and he had a reputation for being both brilliant and deeply troubled. He was the one who first told the tale of the hound, a monstrous beast that haunted the moors and was said to be the curse of the family. But was it a ghost, or was it something else entirely? That's what we're here to find out. And so, the legend began. Not with a ghost, but with a man, a family, and a story that would haunt generations to come. The Hound of the Baskervilles was never just a story, it was a warning, a tale passed down through blood and fear. You remember the first time you heard the hound's cry, didn't you? It was a sound that didn't belong to any living thing, more like the wind had learned to howl in a language of pain. The locals whispered it was a trick of the light, a cruel joke nature played on the ears of the lonely. But you knew better. You'd heard that cry before, in the silence between heartbeats, when the world was still and the air was heavy with something you couldn't name. It started with the dogs. Not just any dogs, but the family's prized mastiff, Old Henry, who had always been the quietest of the pack. One night, he refused to eat, his eyes wide and unblinking, as if staring into a darkness that no light could reach. Then the children began to vanish, not in the way of a fairy tale, but in the way that makes your bones ache. They were taken in the night, their beds left cold, their toys scattered as if they'd never been there at all. The villagers tried to laugh it off, to tell themselves it was just the wind or the old stories coming true. But you, dear listener, you had heard the hound's cry before, and you knew that some stories don't end with the sunrise. You remember the hound, don't you? That great, shadowy beast with eyes like burning coals, how it seemed to follow Sir Henry every step of the way. But what if the hound wasn't just a legend? What if it was real, and it was waiting for the next heir to the Baskersville name? One night, Sir Henry was seen running from the moor, screaming. The hound was there, not just a shadow but a living thing, its breath visible in the cold air. And then he vanished. No trace, no body, just the echoes of his terror and the hound's growl. The villagers whispered that the hound was a curse, a living symbol of the family's guilt. But some said it was the hound itself, cursed by the blood of the Baskersvilles, that had been waiting for centuries to claim another soul. And then, they found the body, not of Sir Henry, but of a young woman who had been searching for him. She was found on the moor, her clothes torn, her face frozen in terror. The hound had marked her, and she had seen the thing no one should ever see. The hound was never caught. It still roams the moor, waiting for the next Baskersville to come to the land. And if you listen closely, you can hear it howling in the wind, a sound that never fades, never dies. I once spoke with a man who claimed to have seen the hound himself, just before it vanished into the mist. He said it was larger than a bull, with eyes like burning coals. He described the creature as moving with unnatural grace, its breath like a whisper of wind through the trees. Some say it was the devil himself. Others say it was the spirit of a man long dead. Some accounts mention a sound, a low, mournful howl that echoes through the moor, like a ghost trying to reach the living. It's said to be the hound's lament, a warning to those who dare to cross its path. But the most chilling testimony comes from a young girl who said she saw the hound as a child, only to vanish when she tried to run. She never spoke of it again, and her family believes she was never the same. Each story adds another layer to the legend, but no one has ever proven the hound's existence. And yet, the moor still holds its secrets, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to uncover them. The first clue came from a dusty, yellowed ledger found in the Baskerville Library. It listed every family member who had died under mysterious circumstances, each marked with a single red X and a cryptic note in the margins. One entry, dated 1875, mentioned a hound with eyes like fire and a shout from the moor that echoed with the voices of the dead. It was signed by a man who claimed to have seen the beast himself. We followed the trail to a remote part of the moor, where the wind howled like a banshee and the earth seemed to hum with an ancient, unspoken warning. There, we found a hidden path carved into the earth, lined with stones that had been moved, as if to block something or someone from passing through. The final clue was a weathered photograph tucked inside the ledger taken decades before the last Baskerville death, showing a man with a hound at his side, the animal's eyes glowing with an unnatural light. You know, the one thing that's always bugged me about this whole Baskerville's business is the hound itself. No one ever saw it, not even Stapleton. Just a shadow in the mist, a whisper in the wind, and then poof, gone. They say it's a curse, a family ghost. But what if it's not even real? What if it's just a story we've made up to explain the fear we feel when we're alone in the dark? And here's the kicker: no one ever saw the hound in the daylight, not even Stapleton. That's strange. Why would a man who's planning to murder his own cousin be so afraid of a dog? Maybe the hound was never real. Maybe it was just a symbol of the family's guilt, the fear that they were cursed by their own blood. That's a lot more haunting than a dog, don't you think? So, in the end, the real mystery of the Baskervilles isn't the hound. It's the silence, the absence of proof, the fact that no one ever saw it, and no one ever saw the truth. You know, some folks say the hound isn't just a beast, it's a mirror of guilt, of secrets buried in the earth. They say the Baskerville name is cursed, and every time a descendant breathes it, the hound howls louder. Others say it's not the hound that's the ghost, but the man who made it. Stapleton, that clever devil. He used the legend to scare the family, to drive them mad. But was he the master of the hound, or just another victim of its hunger? Some say the hound is a warning, a reminder that no matter how far you run, the past always finds you, that the Baskervilles are doomed to repeat their mistakes, and the hound is just the price they pay for pride. But maybe the hound isn't a ghost at all. Maybe it's just a symbol of the fear we carry, the guilt we don't admit, the secrets we bury. And if you listen closely, you might hear it howling back. And so, the mystery remains, tangled in the mist and the myths, with no one quite sure if the legend is a warning or a warning gone wrong. You might say, but what if it's all just a tale to scare the children? And yet, the house still stands, and the legend still lingers. Some say the hound is a spirit, bound to the land, and others say it's a curse that never truly died. In the end, the truth may never be found, and that's what makes it so haunting. What if the hound still waits for the next Baskerville to come home? And so, dear listener, you may wonder, what will your story become? What will your legend be? As the fog rolls in, it whispers secrets older than the moors themselves. You've heard the tales, but have you ever wondered what the hound might be howling at now? Some say the hound is not a beast, but a mirror, a reflection of the guilt we carry, the sins we bury beneath the soil. What would you do if you saw your own shadow run wild? But be careful, dear listener. The hound doesn't just haunt the moors, it haunts the hearts of those who dare to listen too closely. So, as we part ways, I leave you with this: the moors are not empty. They are full of ghosts, of memories, and of stories waiting for you to hear them. And remember, when you walk the lonely paths of your own life, sometimes the hound is not behind you, it's beside you, waiting for you to turn. But don't worry, dear one, there's always another tale, another moor, another hound waiting just beyond the mist. You've heard of Colorado's Rocky Mountains, but have you ever heard of a hotel that's haunted by the very soul of its creation? The Stanley Hotel, built by a man who wanted to create a place of pure escape, ended up becoming a place of pure dread. Designed by a man with the vision of a place where the rich and the weary could find peace, it was supposed to be a haven. But something about the land, the rock, and the bones of the mountain made it a place where the past refused to stay buried. Now, decades later, the Stanley Hotel is more than just a place of lodging. It's a place where the ghosts of its past still walk the halls, where the echoes of a man's ambition and a woman's suffering haunt every shadow. If you're thinking, but this is just a hotel, right? Well, let me tell you, it's not just a place. It's a story, and it's one that's still being written in the whispers of the wind and the hush of the night. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you enjoy, take a look at the Amazon Echo Dot smart speaker. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. The Stanley Hotel began as a dream, a vision of grandeur and luxury. In 1879, a young architect named Henry Stanley set out to build a place that would redefine the American winter resort. But he didn't just want a hotel, he wanted a palace. Stanley's vision was bold, almost impossible. He wanted a hotel that would be open year-round, even in the bitter cold of Colorado. But the land was rocky, the winters harsh, and the townsfolk were skeptical. They called it Stanley's Folly. Finally, in 1882, the Stanley Hotel opened its doors. It was a marvel of engineering, a beacon of hope for the townspeople, and a symbol of stubborn determination. But for Henry Stanley, it was also the beginning of a long and bitter struggle. The hotel was a success, but not for Stanley. The profits were siphoned away by investors, and he was left with nothing but the dream he had built. He died in 1893, a man of vision and ambition, but one who had been beaten by the very land he loved. The Stanley Hotel stood as a monument to his dream, but also to the price of ambition. It was a place of beauty, of history, and of the weight of the past. And as the years passed, it began to whisper its own secrets. You remember the first time you noticed something wasn't quite right. It was a slow, creeping feeling, like the air had thickened, and the lights in the hotel flickered just a little too often. The guests started whispering about the cold spots, the strange sounds in the walls, and the way the elevator would stop without reason. It wasn't just the staff who felt it was the guests, too. There were rumors of a ghost who had once been a hotel employee, a woman who had been wrongfully accused of a crime and had died in the basement. Her story was never officially recorded, but the staff remembered it well. People began to feel the weight of the past. It wasn't just the hotel itself, it was the history, the silence, the way the walls seemed to hold their breath between each moment. You ever feel like the past is watching you? The Stanley Hotel isn't just a place, it's a living memory. You can almost hear the whispers in the elevator, like someone's been waiting a long time to be heard. In 1919, a young woman named Elsie Eiler vanished without a trace. No body, no clues, just a suitcase left behind and a room key that never made it back to the desk. The police called it a case of mistaken identity, but the hotel never forgot her. They say she never left the hotel. Some claim she's still in the elevator, waiting for someone to find her. Others say she's a ghost trapped between two worlds, searching for the one who took her. No one knows for sure what happened to Elsie, but if you stay too long in the Stanley Hotel, you might start wondering if you're the one who's been waiting to be found. I've spoken with several guests who say the hotel feels like it's watching them. One woman told me she saw a figure in the hallway, dressed in a tuxedo, standing still like a statue. Another guest swore she heard a child's laughter echoing from the east wing, even though no one was there. She said it felt like someone was calling her name. There was a man who claimed he saw a ghostly figure in the lobby, dressed in 1920s attire, pouring a drink for no one. He said it looked exactly like the hotel's original owner, Mr. Stanley. One of the most chilling accounts comes from a caretaker who worked there for years. He said he saw a woman in a white dress walking through the hotel, always heading toward the east wing. He never saw her face, but he said she always stopped when he looked at her, as if she were waiting for someone she knew. He left the hotel the day after that. Said he couldn't sleep, and the hotel felt like it was still watching him even after he left. The investigation began with a simple request, a few old photographs, and a list of names. But what we found was more than we expected: old letters, forgotten journals, and a pattern that made the hairs on the back of our necks stand on end. One letter, written in 1923, described a night when the hotel seemed to breathe. The writer spoke of doors slamming on their own, whispers in the halls, and a feeling that the building was watching them. We found names of guests who vanished without a trace, their rooms left untouched, their belongings still in place as if they'd simply stepped out for a moment. It was like the hotel held its breath every time someone disappeared. One guest, a writer named Eleanor, left behind a final note describing a presence that followed her through the hotel like a shadow. She wrote that the walls remembered her and that they never let her go. The more we dug, the more the hotel seemed to resist us. Documents went missing, and the staff became quiet, almost reluctant to speak about what they knew. It was as if the building itself was guarding its secrets. And then, we found a final clue: a journal hidden beneath the floorboards of the hotel's grand staircase. It spoke of a curse, a promise, and a name we'd never heard before. But the story wasn't over yet. You ever notice how some secrets refuse to die? The Stanley Hotel's got one that's been gnawing at the edges of every investigation, like a ghost that won't let go. It's not the screams, not the missing guests, not even the hotel's own history. It's something smaller, something that slips through the cracks. It's the one detail that no one can confirm, no one can deny. A name, a date, a room number, something that's just missing. like the hotel itself is holding its breath, waiting for someone to ask the right question. Some say it's a red herring, a trick of the mind. Others say it's the hotel's way of whispering at truths too painful to speak. But here's the thing, no one ever found the body. No one ever found the room. No one ever found the answer. So the next time you hear that ghostly laughter in the halls, remember this: some secrets don't need to be solved. Some just need to be remembered. And some, like this one, are still waiting for someone to listen. You know, the Stanley Hotel isn't just a place where the ghosts like to hang out, it's a town legend in its own right. Some say it's cursed, others say it's just a place where people get too comfortable and forget to leave. There's a local tale about a man who checked in one night, never left, and was never seen again. The hotel staff claim he was just a regular guest, but the locals say he was a ghost who got stuck in the walls. Some say the hotel's own founder, Collies P. Huntington, was a man who walked the line between genius and madness. He built this place as a retreat, but it became a tomb for his secrets. And then there are the whispers, people who say they've heard the hotel's voice. Not a voice, but a presence. A feeling that the walls are watching, waiting, and remembering. So, what do you think? Is the Stanley Hotel a place of madness, or just a place where the past won't let go? The truth is out there, waiting to be found, or maybe it's waiting for you. You know, some mysteries don't just fade away, they cling on, like a shadow in the corner of your eye. The Stanley Hotel's story isn't over, it's just waiting. The last known sighting of the missing woman, Margaret, was in that very lobby, in 1912. No one saw her again. No body was ever found. Just a trail of unanswered questions and a lingering sense of something wrong. Even today, the Stanley Hotel is a place of both wonder and unease. Some guests swear they feel her presence, a cold touch on the back of their neck, or a whisper in an empty room. So, what do you think? Was Margaret taken by the hotel, or did she just vanish into the fog, like a memory that refuses to fade? The mystery is still with us, waiting for someone to listen, and maybe finally put it to rest. You know, sometimes the ghosts aren't the ones who are lost, they're the ones who never got to say goodbye. And sometimes, the most haunting stories aren't the ones you hear, they're the ones you feel in your bones. So, as you turn the page, remember, some doors are meant to stay closed and some stories are meant to linger. Now, let's talk about the haunted house that inspired a masterpiece and maybe a few more secrets than it should. You've heard of haunted towns, but Bideford, that's a place where the shadows don't just fall, they cling. It's a small coastal town in Devon where the sea whispers secrets and the wind carries ghosts. In the 17th century, a deadly plague swept through the town. It wasn't just sickness, it was something darker, something that left people not just dead, but forgotten. Now, even centuries later, the town still feels the weight of that ancient curse. You can almost hear the silence where the sick once cried out and feel the chill of the unseen watching. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Apple AirPods 2nd generation. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. So, what happened to those poor souls? Did the plague truly end, or did it just change form? That's what we're about to uncover. You know, the first whispers of the midnight plague didn't come from the townsfolk. They came from the sea, from the fishermen who returned with more than just fish. They brought back the bones of the drowned. It started with a boy named Elias, who was said to have a gift for seeing the drowned spirits in the tide pools. The villagers called him a seer, but they also called him a madman, and not without reason. Elias claimed the sea was angry, that it had been feeding on the souls of the drowned, and that it would not stop until it had claimed more. The villagers laughed, but they also began to fear the tides, for the sea had a way of taking what it wanted. It wasn't until the plague began to spread that the villagers took notice. The sickness was unlike anything they had seen. It came in the night, not with fever or cough, but with a slow, silent taking of the soul, leaving only the body behind. The church tried to exorcise the spirits, but the plague only grew stronger. Some said it was the sea's revenge, others believed it was the curse of Elias, who had dared to speak to the drowned. And still, no one could say for sure what had begun. So you see, the midnight plague of Bideford didn't start with a ghost. It started with a boy, a sea, and a secret that the tides would never let go. You remember the way the air smelled in Bideford before the first sickness took hold. It was the kind of smell that clings to the back of your throat like old fish and wet stone, and it made your skin prickle with a quiet unease. Then came the coughs. Not the kind that makes you want to run, but the kind that stays with you, like a shadow in the corner of your eye. You'd hear it in the night, a wet, rasping sound that echoed through the town like a warning. The first doctor came with a face like thunder and a bag of herbs. He said it was the damp, the bad air, and that the people should keep their doors closed. But the sickness didn't stop. It crept into every home, and no one knew where it came from. Then the fever. It came without warning, and it didn't care who it took. The poor and the rich alike lay in their beds, burning and delirious, while the townsfolk gathered in the churchyard, whispering prayers for the dead. And still, no one knew why it happened. It was as if the town had been cursed, and the sickness was just the beginning of something much worse. Something that had been waiting in the dark for a long, long time. You remember the first time the fog rolled in thick and fast, blocking the road entirely, and the whole village held its breath. It wasn't just the cold that crept in, it was something older, something watching. One morning, the baker's daughter vanished without a sound. The doors were locked, the fire was still burning, and the bread was left fresh on the counter, as if she just stepped out for a moment. They found her later, in the woods, her footprints leading straight into the fog. No trace of her, just the scent of lavender and the sound of her laughter, as if she'd never left. To this day, the fog still rolls in every winter, and the villagers say she's still out there, waiting for the right moment to return. I met a woman in Bideford who claims she saw the ghost of a girl in a red dress wandering the old quay at midnight. She said it looked like a child, but those eyes were empty, like they'd seen too much. She told me she tried to follow it, but the moment she stepped closer, the figure vanished like smoke. She said it left behind a faint smell of salt and something sweet, like burnt sugar. Another fisherman swore he saw a woman in a shawl standing on the shore, her face hidden in her hands. He said she was weeping, but when he tried to reach out, the sand beneath her feet just disappeared. He called it the Weeping Woman of Bideford. Some say she's a spirit of the drowned, others say she's a warning. Either way, no one goes out there after dark without a lantern. One of the locals told me that if you're ever lost in Bideford at night, don't look for the way back. Just look for the light. But if you do, you might find yourself walking through a door that wasn't there before. That's what they say, anyway. I'm not sure if they're telling the truth or if they're just trying to scare the newcomers. Either way, the town still feels watched. And the sea, well, the sea never forgets. We followed the old maps to the churchyard, where the stones are still worn by time and whispers. The air smelled of damp earth and something older, something that clung to the skin like a memory. The sexton, a grizzled man with a face like weathered bark, told us the graveyard had seen more than just death. He said the stones had voices, and some nights, they called for more than just prayers. The symbols matched none of the known languages, but the sexton recognized them. He said they were the mark of a long-dead sect, a group that had once worshipped the moon and believed the earth itself was alive with spirits. The deeper we dug, the more we realized the plague hadn't been a sickness at all, it had been a ritual, a way to summon something from the earth. Something that had been waiting for centuries to wake. We left the graveyard with more questions than answers, but one thing was clear, the plague had not ended. It had merely gone to sleep, and now, it was stirring again. You've heard the names, you've seen the faces, but there's one thing that's always slipped through the cracks. No one knows who the real victim was, not even the town records. The only thing they ever found was a locket, silver and tarnished, with a tiny engraving inside. It said, "For my dearest Mabel." But no one remembers a Mabel in Bideford that year. You can walk the streets, touch the walls, even smell the sea breeze, but the one thing you'll never find is the name that ended it all. And so the town keeps its secrets, just like it keeps its ghosts. No one's ever said it aloud, but you can hear it in the wind, the creak of the old beams, the hush that falls at midnight. The mystery isn't the ghost, it's the absence. The one thing that was never meant to be found. Some say the plague wasn't just a sickness, it was a curse, a punishment for the sins of the town, brewed in the blood of the innocent. They whisper that the church bell didn't ring for the dead, but for the living, calling them to the grave before their time. The most popular tale is that a priest, desperate to save his flock, made a pact with the devil. And the devil, of course, had other plans. Some say the devil's hand was in the plague, and some say the priest's guilt was worse than the plague itself. But the truth, that's what the town still hides. Still, they tell you to stay away from the old graveyard and don't walk the docks after dark. The town has its secrets, and it doesn't like to be asked twice. You see it now, don't you? That same flicker in the corner of your eye, the same whisper in the wind. But the truth, it's been buried for centuries, and it's still waiting to be found. The village of Bideford still watches over its secrets. The sea is calm now, but the waters remember. And the people who live here, they know the stories just like you do. There's a silence here that feels different. Not the kind of silence that comes from emptiness, but the kind that feels like something is still breathing, listening. Maybe the truth is never meant to be found. Maybe it's better that the mystery stays. After all, some stories are meant to be told, not solved. So you'll keep listening, won't you? Because the past has a way of finding you when you least expect it. And sometimes, it's not the end of the story, it's just the beginning. You've heard the whispers of Bideford, but have you ever wondered what lingers in the silence between the stories? Sometimes, the most haunting truths are the ones we never speak aloud. The sea has its own language, and sometimes it speaks in voices we can't quite understand. What if the tides are remembering something we've forgotten? And as you leave this tale behind, remember, the past is never truly gone. It just waits, patient and quiet, for the right moment to remind us. So, if you ever find yourself in Bideford and the wind seems to carry a song you've heard before, listen closely. Sometimes the dead have more to say than we expect. Now, let's move on to another tale, one that's just as old, just as quiet, and just as full of secrets. You've heard of castles, you've heard of mansions, but have you ever heard of a place where time seems to stop? The Priory of Sion isn't just a ruin, it's a whisper in the wind, a secret in the stone. Nestled in the hills of France, this place was once a refuge for scholars and mystics. Now, it's a place where silence speaks louder than any scream. You know, the Priory of Sion didn't start as a place of ghosts, but as a refuge. In the 12th century, a group of scholars and knights found themselves hunted by the church. They needed somewhere safe, somewhere to hide their knowledge. They built a stone fortress, nestled in the hills of France, where the air was thin and the silence heavy. It was a place of secrets, where scholars copied ancient texts and knights trained in secret. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Stanley Quencher 40 Oz tumbler. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. Some say the Priory was protected by an ancient order, a secret society that had watched over the world for centuries. They were the keepers of lost wisdom, the silent watchers who never let the light go out. And so, the Priory became more than just a place. It became a symbol of resistance, of hidden knowledge, and of the quiet strength that lies in the shadows. But even symbols can fade, and even the strongest secrets can be forgotten or not. You remember how it started, don't you? A whisper in the wind, a flicker in the candlelight, a feeling that the air had grown heavy with something unseen. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. The first sign was the missing clock. It had been there for years, ticking away the hours with steady precision. One morning, it was gone, and the silence that followed was louder than any sound. People started to notice things. The way the dust settled in strange patterns, the way the door would creak open on its own, the way the walls seemed to breathe with a slow, ancient rhythm. The caretaker's wife told me about the shadows that moved in the corners of the room, the way the light would shift even though the sun hadn't changed position. It was subtle, but it made you wonder if you were being watched. And then there was the sound, a faint, rhythmic tapping, like fingers on glass, echoing through the stone walls. No one could say where it came from, but it was always there, waiting. It was all so quiet, so still. You could feel the weight of something ancient pressing against the walls, waiting for the right moment to make itself known. You know, the real horror didn't start with ghosts or whispers. It began with a missing child, a little boy who vanished without a sound. The village said he was taken by the wind, but I'm not so sure. No one saw him go. No one heard a cry. Just the sound of the wind, and then silence. The village kept its stories, but the truth was buried deeper than the roots of the old trees. The villagers never found him. They never stopped looking. But some say he's still there, watching, waiting. And some say he's not the only one. The Priory of Sion, you see, has always been more than a place. It's a mirror, reflecting the fears we can't name. And sometimes it reflects back more than we're ready to face. So when the wind calls and the trees whisper, you might just want to listen. But be careful, some stories don't want to be told. I've spoken to several people who claim to have seen them, these silent watchers. One woman said they stood at the edge of the cloister, like statues carved from the very stone. Another said they watched from the bell tower, their eyes glowing like embers in the dark, as if they were waiting for something or someone to return. One night, a visitor claimed to see them in the courtyard, moving like smoke, their forms shifting between the trees and the crumbling walls. They don't speak, they don't move, they just watch. And when they do, it's like the silence around them becomes louder, heavier, like the weight of a secret long forgotten. We began our investigation with the old records, and what we found was more than we expected. A name kept appearing, one that should have been buried with the past. The more we dug, the more we realized that this name wasn't just a footnote, it was a thread leading to a woman who vanished without a trace in the early 1900s. The records hinted at a hidden room beneath the priory, a place where secrets were kept and sometimes, they say, souls were lost. We followed the trail to a forgotten cellar, its air thick with the scent of damp stone and something else, something older, something that made the hair on the back of our necks stand up. There, we found the final clue, a journal, its pages filled with frantic entries, written in a voice that trembled between fear and desperation. And so, we left with more questions than answers, the weight of the past pressing down on us like the stones above. You've heard the whispers of the priory, but there's one thing they never explain. the missing tapestry. It was said to be woven with moonlight and the tears of the saint, but it vanished without a trace, like the stars in a midnight sky. The monks claimed it held the secret to the priory's power, but no one ever found it. They say it was stolen by a rival order, or that it was never there to begin with. A ghost of a legend, like the stories we tell to keep the dark from swallowing us whole. You might ask, what does it matter if a tapestry is gone? But the silence it leaves behind is louder than any scream. It's the kind of mystery that lingers in your mind long after the fire has died down. And so, the priory watches, silent and still, with eyes that have seen more than they should have. And the tapestry, well, it's still out there, somewhere, waiting for the right hand to find it, or the right silence to let it be. You've heard the stories about the priory of Sion, but what about the people who still live here? Some say the walls remember, and the locals have always whispered that the priory isn't just haunted, it's watched. The old-timers tell me that the priory was built on sacred ground, and the spirits here aren't just ghosts, they're guardians. Some say they protect the land, others say they guard a secret the world is never meant to know. There are theories, of course. Some say it's a place of ancient rituals, others that it's a prison for something that shouldn't exist. But one thing is certain, the locals know more than they're willing to say. And then there are the dreams people who claim they've seen the priory in their sleep, standing at the edge of a cliff, hearing a voice call them by name. They wake up with the same feeling, they've been watched all along. So, what do you think? Are these just stories passed down through generations, or is there something more? I'll tell you this, if you ever find yourself standing at the priory's gates, don't be surprised if it seems to be waiting for you. There's a question that haunts the priory more than any ghost. What happened to those missing books? No one can say for sure, but some believe they were taken by the same hands that vanished the scholars. The last known sighting of the books was in a locked room, untouched and unopened. The door was found ajar, the key still in the lock, as if someone had left in a hurry or had never intended to return. And so, the priory remains a place of questions, not answers, a sanctuary for the curious and the haunted, where silence is the only language left to speak. If you ever find yourself wandering through the woods near the priory, remember some places are better left unexplored, and some mysteries are meant to stay that way. You walked with me through the shadows of the priory of Sion, where silence speaks louder than screams. But remember, the oldest ghosts are the ones we carry in our own hearts. Sometimes, the most unsettling stories are the ones we never finish, left hanging like a door slightly ajar in an old house, waiting for someone to step through. And if you ever feel a chill in the air, or hear a voice calling your name in the dark, remember, you're never truly alone. Until next time, stay warm, stay curious, and never forget that the greatest mysteries are the ones that linger in the quietest corners of your mind. You've heard of the Baskersville legend, but let me tell you about the place where it all began. A crumbling manor, hidden in the English countryside, where shadows seem to move on their own. The air here is thick with history and something older. It's said the wind carries the sound of a hound's howl, not from any animal, but from the spirit of a cursed beast. Some say the hound isn't just a creature, but a symbol, a warning, a curse. And if you listen closely, you might hear it still, howling in the silence between the stones. So, what do you think? Is the hound real, or is it just the echo of a family's guilt? Either way, it's not going anywhere. And neither are the stories. You remember the old legend, don't you? The tale of the Baskersville hound, that monstrous beast said to haunt the moors. It's been told for generations, passed down like a secret, with every whisper adding more dread than the last. It started with Sir Hugo Baskersville, a man who was said to be more beast than man. He was cursed by his own blood, you see, and the hound was his punishment. A pack of hounds followed him through the moors, and he was never seen again. The Baskersvilles were a proud family, and the curse was their greatest shame. They tried to bury it, to forget it, but the hound always returned. And so, the legend grew, and with it, the fear that never quite left the moors. Now, the hound is more than a tale. It's a symbol, a warning, a whisper of the past that lingers in the dark. And if you're ever walking the moors alone, you might just hear it too. You know, the first thing that ever made me question the Baskersvilles was the way the hound's shadow seemed to stretch longer than the moonlight. It wasn't just long, it was wrong, like the night itself had grown tired of its own shape. The local farmers said it was just the wind, but the wind doesn't make that sound. It doesn't make the sound of something breathing in the tall grass, or the sound of something dragging itself across the earth. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you enjoy, take a look at the Amazon Echo Dot smart speaker. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. One night, the dog began to bark not at anything, but at the air. It would stop, then start again, as if trying to tell us something. We didn't know what, but we knew it wasn't meant for us. And then came the letters, not from the Baskersvilles, but from someone who claimed to have seen the hound. They spoke of something older than the house, older than the moor, something that had been waiting. It was then that I realized the hound wasn't just a legend. It was a warning, and we were all just standing in the path of its next move. You remember the hound, don't you? That great, shadowy beast that haunted the Baskerville family for generations. But what if the hound wasn't just a creature of myth, but a symbol of something far more personal? The last time Sir Henry saw the hound, it wasn't a beast, it was a man. A man with a wild look in his eyes, whispering something about the curse. It was the night he vanished, and the hound never left his side. They found him days later, not far from the moor. His clothes were torn, his face was pale, and his hands were covered in something that looked like blood, though no one could say where it came from. And then, the hound disappeared too. No one ever saw it again. But sometimes, when the wind howls through the moor, you can still hear its cry like a man in pain, or a beast in despair. So, what if the hound wasn't real at all? What if it was just a warning, a voice from the past, whispering to those who dared to walk the same path? I've spoken to dozens of locals who say they've seen the hound, but never in the daylight. One old farmer told me he saw its shadow flicker through the trees like a ghost, then vanished into the mist. Another woman swore she heard its growl echo through the valley, though she couldn't see it. She said it sounded like 1,000 dogs howling at once, and her own dog ran for miles, never stopping. Even the police, when they came to investigate the disappearances, said they felt the hound's presence. One officer described a cold wind that rose from the ground without a breeze, and a smell like burning fur. Some say the hound isn't a beast at all, but the shadow of a man who once lived here, lost to time, but never to the land. His name's been forgotten, but his sorrow lingers. And if you ever find yourself walking these paths at night, listen closely. You might hear it too. Just don't look directly into its eyes. That's when the real story begins. We followed the old maps and found a place where the earth seemed to hold its breath. The path was overgrown, and the wind carried the scent of something ancient, like moss and iron. The first thing we found was a stone circle, cracked and weathered, with symbols etched into the rock that looked like old warnings or perhaps old prayers. Then came the strange footprints, deep, large, and unmistakably not human. They led away from the circle, into the woods, like the earth itself was trying to tell us something. We found a rusted gate, half buried in the earth, with a sign that had long since faded. But the words were still there, just barely, like a whisper from the past. And there, at the edge of the clearing, we found a grave with no name, just a simple cross, and the words, "Rest in peace, old hound." You know, there's one thing about the Baskerville legend that's always bugged me. No one ever explains why the hound was never found after the last sighting. It's like the mystery just stopped. Did it vanish? Did it die? Or was it never there at all? It's like the case was left hanging in the air, like a thread that slipped through your fingers. You can almost hear the silence of that final moment, the hush before the hound disappeared into the night. And yet, every time someone tries to write it off, there's always someone else who insists they saw it just once, in the corner of their eye, or behind a curtain, or in the reflection of a window. So, I wonder, what if the hound wasn't just a legend, but a reminder that some mysteries are meant to linger, to haunt us, to whisper in the dark until we are ready to listen. You've heard the tales, but what if the Baskervilles were never just dogs? Some say the hound was a family heirloom, passed down through generations until it vanished with the last true heir. What if the hound wasn't a beast, but a symbol, a warning, or a curse, wrapped in fur? There's a theory, whispered at the local pub, that the hound wasn't real at all. Some say it was a shadow, a trick of the mind like a mirage on the moors. But if it wasn't real, then what did it scare so badly? And why did the moors still feel like they're watching? You can't help but wonder, what if the hound was real, but not a beast? What if it was a guardian, a spirit bound to the land, waiting for the right moment to rise again? And what if it's waiting for you? The Baskervilles are gone, but the legend lingers. Some say the hound still runs free, unseen and unchained. And if you've ever felt a cold breath on your neck at night, or heard a bark that wasn't yours, then maybe you've already met it. And so, the mystery of the hound of the Bakersvilles lingers, not as a tale of terror, but as a question that refuses to be answered. Was it all a trick? Or did something truly monstrous walk the moors that night? The Baskerville family line has since faded, but the name remains, whispered in the corners of the county like a ghost that won't stay buried. Some say the hound was a product of the imagination, a symbol of fear that took on a life of its own. Others swear they've seen it in the mist, a shadow with eyes that burn like embers. The truth, dear listener, may never be found, but as long as the moors remain and the wind carries the sound of a distant howl, the story will live on. So, I'll leave you with this. What if the hound was never truly gone? What if it's still out there, waiting for the next brave soul to walk the path it once called home? You know, sometimes the most haunted places aren't the ones you expect. A quiet library, a dusty attic, even a well-kept garden can hold secrets that whisper through the years. And sometimes, the most chilling stories aren't told in screams or shadows but in silence, in the spaces between the words, in the way the air feels heavier when you're alone. So if you're ever wandering through a place that feels just a little too still, maybe it's not the wind you heard but something else entirely. I've told you many tales, but I have more. More that will linger in your mind, more that will leave you wondering what's just beyond the edge of your own understanding. Stay warm, stay curious, and remember some stories don't end. They just wait for the right listener. You've heard of the Eiffel Tower, the Seine, the Louvre, but what about the catacombs beneath Paris? They're not just bones and tunnels, they're a labyrinth of secrets where time itself seems to whisper. Built in the 18th century, these tunnels were once a dumping ground for the city's dead. Over 6 million bodies, stacked like bricks, huddled in silence beneath the streets. But it wasn't just bones and bodies. The catacombs became a place of pilgrimage, a sacred site for those who believed the dead had voices that could be heard only when the city slept. They say the air is thick with the breath of the past, and that if you listen closely, you can hear the dead murmuring in a language that's not quite French, not quite anything at all. And if you're not careful, they say, the whispering won't just be in your ears, it'll be in your dreams, your memories, your very soul. You've heard the name, but the truth. The catacombs didn't start as a graveyard. They were a solution to a city's growing problem: too many bodies, too little space. Paris was choking on its own history. In 1786, a man named Henriquel discovered a forgotten tomb beneath the city. But it wasn't just bones, this was a mass grave of the poor, those left behind by the revolution. The city had no choice but to bury them deeper. By the 1800s, the bones were being moved by the thousands. The catacombs became a kind of silent monument to the forgotten. But it wasn't just the poor, there were soldiers, criminals, even aristocrats who had been buried in secret. The city didn't want to admit it, but the catacombs were more than a burial ground. They were a place where history, memory, and the past refused to stay buried. And so, the whispering began not from the dead, but from the stories they left behind, waiting for someone to listen. You remember how the air had a strange weight to it, like the city itself was holding its breath. The first sign wasn't a scream or a shadow, it was silence, so thick it felt like a living thing. Then came the whispers, low and winding through the bricks like smoke. Not from the wind, not from the city, it was coming from the walls themselves, as if the stones remembered something they shouldn't. One old man claimed he saw a child's hand pressed against the window of a closed shop. Not a trick of the light, not a reflection, just a hand, pale and small, like it had been waiting for someone to notice. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Fire TV Stick 4K streaming device. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. And then, the first disappearance. No one knew who it was, but they knew it wasn't just a coincidence. The city had started to remember, and it wasn't ready to let go. One night in 1871, a young seamstress named Madeleine was last seen walking these tunnels, her lantern flickering like a dying star. She never returned, and her absence left a silence heavier than the air. The last witness claimed to hear her voice echoing, calling for help, but no one could find her. They said the catacombs swallowed her whole, like a grave without a coffin. They say the catacombs still remember her, and sometimes, on still nights, you can hear her voice, soft and sweet, calling from the depths like a lullaby for the lost. No one knows for sure what happened to Madeleine. Some say the catacombs are alive, and some say she found a way out but never came back to tell the tale. I once spoke with a retired architect who swore the catacombs echo with more than just footsteps. He said the walls breathe, and sometimes they whisper in a language no one can translate. He described a moment when the silence was so thick it pressed against his ears, and then just for a heartbeat words formed in his mind, not in any language he knew, but in the shape of a name. One woman, a former nurse, said she heard a child's voice calling her name in the dark just before she turned around and found no one there, only a single, damp handprint on the wall. She never told anyone what she saw, but she said the silence after that night was louder than any sound. There's a story, too, of a young couple who got lost and heard the walls murmur their own names, like the catacombs were trying to remember them. And if you think you've heard the end of the story, you haven't. The catacombs don't just hold the dead, they hold the stories of those who listen too closely. We began our investigation in the shadow of the Seine, where the air feels heavier, like the city itself is holding its breath. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, not by eyes, but by something else entirely. The first clue was a faded map, tucked inside an old book at the Bibliothèque Sainte Geneviève. It pointed to a forgotten entrance beneath the city, a place that had been sealed for over a century. Inside, the air was damp and cold, and the silence was louder than any sound. We found nothing but a single, rusted key and a name carved into the stone, Tian. As we ventured deeper, the whispers grew louder, like 1,000 voices speaking at once. They weren't words, but a feeling like the walls were remembering something we weren't meant to know. The final clue came in the form of a diary, hidden beneath a loose floorboard. It spoke of a secret society, of rituals, and of a terrible fate that befell those who dared to disturb the past. You know, there's one thing about the catacombs that's always baffled me. No one can explain why the water in the underground streams never freezes, even in the coldest winters. It's like the catacombs have their own kind of warmth, a secret fire that no one has ever found. Some say it's the ghosts keeping the place alive, others think it's something older, something buried deeper than the bones. But here's the kicker, the water's temperature is always exactly the same. No matter how cold it gets outside, the water stays just a few degrees above freezing. It's like the catacombs are holding their breath, waiting for something, and no one has ever found the source of that warmth. It's like the catacombs are alive, breathing just enough to keep their secrets warm and just enough to keep us wondering. You've heard the stories, but let me tell you what the locals still whisper. Some say the catacombs are a gateway, not a tomb. Others insist the bones don't rest there at all. There's a rumor that the bones were never even moved from the church, that they're still there, beneath the floorboards, waiting for the right time to rise. Some say the catacombs are a mirror, showing you the worst of yourself. Others say they're a test, meant to draw out the fear that lives in every heart. And then there's the tale of the woman who never left. They say she wandered in one day, never came out, and now her voice is all that remains. The locals still debate whether she was lost, possessed, or simply waiting. But one thing's certain, the catacombs don't forget. You see, the mystery isn't just in the bones of the catacombs, it's in the silence that follows. Some say the last visitor never left. Others whisper that the caretaker's body was never found. But what if the real mystery is the one we're still chasing? The official records say the caretaker vanished in 1972. The police closed the case, but not without suspicion. Did he fall into the depths, or was he taken? And if he was taken, by what or who did he vanish into? Some say the catacombs have a will of their own, that they remember, that they pull people in. But what if the real question is, who is still waiting for someone to listen? You've heard the whispers, but what if the real answer is still buried in the dark? And what if the only way to find it is to go back and listen? You've heard the whispers, felt the weight of the past, and now you're left wondering what if the stories are just the beginning? The catacombs may be silent now, but the echoes of those who came before are never far. Do you ever feel them, just at the edge of your hearing? And yet, there's something even more haunting than the story is what we choose to leave unsaid. But before we go, what if the next story is just around the corner? Or perhaps, in the silence between the whispers? You've heard of the Titanic, but what about the SS Mont Blanc? A ship that vanished in 1918, leaving behind more questions than answers. What if I told you it wasn't just a ship, it was a time bomb waiting to explode? The Mont Blanc was loaded with something dangerous, over 2,000 tons of TNT, in fact. A cargo of war, bound for Europe during World War I. But it wasn't the bombs that doomed it was a collision, a spark, and a chain of events that turned the sea into a grave. Survivors told of ghostly figures in the water, of whispers carried on the wind, and of an eerie calm that followed the explosion. Some say the Mont Blanc never truly sank, it just disappeared, leaving behind a secret that still lingers in the deep. Today, the wreck of the Mont Blanc still lies at the bottom of the St. Lawrence, a silent monument to tragedy. But it's not just the story of a ship that went down, it's the story of a place where the past refuses to stay buried. So you want to know how it all started? Well, it began with a ship called the SS Mont Blanc a proud French luxury liner, sleek as a silver spoon, and as full of secrets as a sailor's pocket. Built for the wealthy, it carried more than just passengers, it carried dreams, love letters, and the very fabric of a world on the brink of change. Its cargo wasn't just for show, it was a ticking time bomb, and the world didn't know it. Not even the crew. That's when the tragedy began, and the Mont Blanc became more than a ship, it became a ghost, a warning, a story that haunts the sea to this day. You know, sometimes the first sign of something wrong is just the silence. The kind that settles in like a heavy quilt, pressing down on your chest, and making you wonder if the world has gone quiet or if you just stopped listening. Then there's the smell, a sharp, metallic tang that clings to your clothes and your thoughts. It's not the sea, it's something older, something that lingers even when the wind dies down. Then there's the light. It's not the sun, not really. It's something else, something that doesn't quite belong. It glints off the water, off the ship's rails, off the faces of the crew like it's watching, waiting. And finally, the sound. A low, rhythmic groan that comes from deep within the ship. Like it's alive, like it's breathing, like it's been waiting for this moment, and it's not going to let you forget. You see it now, don't you? The moment the asterisk Mont Blanc asterisk met its fate, the ocean turned from blue to black. The ship was a ghost in the storm, and the men aboard were just as lost as the sea. The explosion was a thunderclap in the dark, a shockwave that split the sea and shattered the minds of those on board. Some men were thrown into the water, others thrown into the void of their own panic. But the worst part was what happened next. The ship wasn't just lost to the sea, it was lost to the world. No bodies were recovered, no survivors were found. It vanished like a dream, leaving only silence in its wake. And so, the asterisk Mont Blanc asterisk became more than a ship, it became a legend. A warning, a ghost, a story that haunts the sea and the souls who remember it. I spoke with a retired naval officer who claims he saw the asterisk Mont Blanc asterisk S ghost in the fog off Nova Scotia. He says it was a ship of light, no smoke, no sound, just a cold silence where the sea once roared. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something to enjoy, take a look at the Amazon Echo Dot 5th smart speaker. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. One woman from Halifax swore she heard a bell ring at midnight, clear and resonant, like the ship was calling her back to the water. She said it stopped when she turned on the lights. A sailor from the asterisk Empress of Ireland asterisk claimed he saw the asterisk Mont Blanc asterisk S ghost on the night of the disaster. He said it was a mirror image, like the ship had been pulled back from the depths by a force beyond the sea. One of the few surviving crew members, a Canadian officer, said he saw the ship's last moments in a dream. He said the fire was blue, not orange, and the sea didn't roar, it whispered. Even the Coast Guard has its own tale of a storm in 1918 where they saw a ghostly ship on radar, but no one could find it. They said it vanished like a mirage, leaving only the sound of a distant, mournful horn. We followed the trail of the asterisk Mont Blanc asterisk to the port of Halifax, where the air still hums with the memory of that night. The city had grown, but the harbor held its secrets like a mother's lullaby. The investigation began with old newspapers and faded photographs, but the real clues were in the silence, how the water never seemed to settle, and how the wind carried a sound like distant weeping. They found the names of the lost, but the deeper mystery lay in the unmarked graves and the whispers that followed those who dared to dig too deep. And then there were the voices, soft, almost musical, rising with the tide, as if the sea itself was remembering what it had swallowed. You've heard the stories of the SS asterisk Mont Blanc asterisk, the explosion, the tragedy, the ghosts. But there's one thing they never found, one thing that's been left in the dark, like the bottom of the sea. They say the ship was carrying 2,800 tons of TNT, but no one knows where it was stored. Was it in the hold? In the engine room? Or did it just vanish, like the lives of those on board? You might think that after all this time, the mystery would be solved. But no, it's still out there, waiting for someone to look harder, to dig deeper, to listen to the whispers of the sea. So, what do you think? Was the asterisk Mont Blanc asterisk a victim of fate, or did it take something with it? And if it did, what's still waiting in the dark for someone to find? You've heard the stories, but have you ever wondered what the locals really think? Some say the ship still drifts under the waves, carrying the weight of its last moments. One fisherman swears he saw a ghostly shape on the water not long after the ship sank. He said it looked like a woman, holding something in her hands. In some places, they say the sea remembers, that it keeps the stories of those who were never found, that it waits for the right moment to tell them. So, what do you think? Is the ship still out there, or is it just the sea keeping its secrets? Or maybe the story is still waiting for you. You know, sometimes the truth is just too heavy to carry, and some mysteries, they're not meant to be solved. They're meant to linger like a ghost in the mist. The records are sparse, the testimonies conflicting, and the names of the lost, well, they're just names in a book, waiting for someone to listen. We've searched the ocean floor, scoured the archives, and followed every lead, but the story still doesn't end. It just waits. And so, we return to the edge of the sea, not with answers, but with questions, because sometimes, the unanswered is the most haunting of all. You might think the sea has moved on, but sometimes the waves remember. Have you ever wondered what the water whispers to those who don't belong? The asterisk Mont Blanc asterisk was more than a ship. It was a place where lives were lost, and some say, not forgotten. What do you think lingers in the cold, dark depths? Before we move on, let me ask, do you believe the stories are just stories, or are they echoes of something real? Well, dear listener, the sea is never done speaking. I'll be right back with another tale, but for now, let the water carry your thoughts away. You've heard of haunted churches, but have you ever heard of a choir that sings itself to death? Litburg Church in Suffolk, England, has a choir that's been echoing through its stone walls for centuries, but something about those voices has always felt off. The choir was once a proud part of the town's identity, but there's a legend that the voices of the young singers are still heard at night, echoing through the nave like a ghostly lament. You've heard the stories, but have you ever wondered what it was like to stand in that silence, listening for something you weren't supposed to hear? The priest who disappeared with them was never found, and the church has been quiet ever since. But the choir still sings, though no one can say where the voices come from. You've heard the stories, but have you ever wondered what it would feel like to stand in the nave and hear those voices again, like they were never gone? There are whispers that the choir is cursed, that it was born from a dark pact and now haunts the living. You've heard the stories, but have you ever wondered what it would take to silence the choir once and for all? Or if the voices were ever truly gone to begin with? You ever notice how some places seem to hold their secrets tighter than others? Leifberg Church is one of those places. It's not just the stone or the stained glass, it's the air, the way the light falls like it's holding its breath. The church dates back to the 11th century, but it's the 14th century that really shaped its bones. A Benedictine monk named Brother William took charge, and with him came a choir bright, young voices that once filled these halls with divine harmony. Some say the voices were taken by the plague, others say they were silenced by Brother William's obsession. But the legend goes that the choir never truly left. They linger, trapped in the stone, their song echoing in the silence that followed. And so, Leifberg Church became more than a place of worship. It became a place where the past refused to stay buried. You can still hear it, if you listen closely, just beneath the ticking of the clock and the whisper of the wind. So, what do you think? Was it the plague, the monks, or something else entirely that left the choir trapped in stone? Or maybe they never left at all. You remember the first time you heard the choir, didn't you? A soft, lilting melody, like the wind through the leaves, or a child's voice calling from the hills. It was gentle, but something about it felt tough. The song wasn't in any of the church's records. No one had ever heard it before. Yet it played on, like a ghostly whisper, just as the sun dipped below the horizon. The next morning, the rector found a small, folded piece of paper in the choir loft. It read simply, "I can't sing anymore." The handwriting was childlike, and the ink had bled through. And then, the first real sign. A voice. Not from the choir, not from the organ, but from the air itself. A voice that whispered, "Let me sing." Not a child's voice, but something older, something hungry. It wasn't until the next week that they found the first body. Not in the church, not in the graveyard, but in the bell tower. A child's body, wrapped in a choir robe, lying in a shallow grave beneath the first bell. You remember the story about the choir boys, don't you? The ones who vanished without a trace in the dead of night, their voices silenced forever. They were the best singers in the village, their voices like silver bells ringing through the nave. But one morning, they were gone. The villagers whispered of a curse of an ancient evil that had taken them, but no one dared to go inside after that night. And now, the church is silent again. No voices, no songs. Just the echo of a child's laughter, faint and far away. I've spoken to several locals who say they've heard the choir in the dead of night. One man told me he was sure he saw a figure in the pews, humming a tune that wasn't on any church playlist. Another woman swore she saw the choir members' faces in the stained glass, watching her as she left the church. She said they looked too real, too knowing. Some say the choir only appears if you're truly listening. One woman told me she heard them while she was grieving, and they sang her a lullaby from childhood. But the most unsettling account? A man who claimed the choir followed him home. He said the voices would stop when he closed the door, but they'd return the moment he opened it again. These stories are more than just folklore, they're the echoes of something real, something that lingers in the silence between the notes. We started by asking the local vicar, a man with more patience than sense, if he'd seen anything strange in the church. He said, "I've seen the choir boys dance in their sleep, but they're just kids." The first real clue came from the parish records, names of choir boys who vanished in the 1800s, their last known locations marked by a single, unexplained absence from the choir list. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Apple AirPods 2nd generation. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. One night, a local historian brought a lantern and a bottle of brandy, insisting we see it for ourselves. He said the choir boys were never just children, they were something else entirely. We found a hidden chamber beneath the organ, sealed with a rusted iron door, its hinges creaking like a whisper from the past. Inside, the air was cold, and the silence was heavy with expectation. The final clue was a single, yellowed photograph of a choir boy in the 1920s, his eyes wide with fear, standing in the same spot where we now stood, his face frozen in a moment of pure terror. You know, the real mystery isn't the ghost, it's the one thing that's never been explained. The one detail that lingers like a whisper in the dark. Every time someone investigates, they find the same thing: no bodies, no signs of struggle, just silence where there should be voices. The records say they were all taken in the same night, the same way. No one knows why, and no one ever will. It's like the church itself is holding its breath. And that's the thing, isn't it? The real curse isn't the ghost, it's the silence that follows. The one detail that haunts us all. Some say the choir wasn't just singing, it was whispering. A melody so haunting, it made the air go still. Did they hear it in the pews, or was it just their own breath that turned to silence? The townsfolk call it the choir of the unseen. They say the voices come from the stones themselves, trapped by the centuries. Some believe it's the souls of the children who once lived here, still waiting for a place to rest. One local legend says the choir was cursed by a priest who once tried to silence the voices of the dead. He made a pact with dark forces, and now the church is his eternal prison, singing its sorrow into the night. Even today, some still hear it. They say the choir is a warning, a reminder that the past never truly leaves. Whether it's a trick of the mind or something far older, one thing is certain: it's still singing, and it's never been silenced. You know, sometimes the most haunting mysteries aren't about ghosts at all, but the people who vanished without a trace. And in Blithburg, that's exactly what we're left with. The last known sighting of the missing girl was in 1948, just before the choir vanished. No body, no clues, just silence where there should have been song. Locals say the wind still carries a faint melody, like a choir whispering in the dark. But no one can say for sure if it's a memory or a warning. The mystery lingers like the echo of a hymn never quite gone, never quite heard. And in Blithburg, it's not just the past that haunts us, it's the silence that follows. You've heard the echoes of Blithburg's choir, felt the weight of centuries in every stone. But sometimes, the most haunting stories are the ones that fade into silence. The church may be still, but the past is never truly gone. It lingers in the air, in the dust on the pews, in the way the wind whispers through the hollows of the stonework. And when you leave, you might not hear the choir, but you'll feel it, in your bones, in the spaces between the notes of the world you left behind. So remember this place, not for the fear it inspires, but for the way it holds time, and the voices that still call from the dark. You've heard the whispers of Whitley Bay, haven't you? That old place on the edge of the sea, where the tide rolls in and out like a heartbeat, and the wind carries voices from long ago. It's a place that feels untouched by the modern world, like it's been waiting for someone to stumble upon it again, just like it was waiting for the children who never left. They say the children were never meant to leave, and that the walls still hum with their laughter, just a little too loud, just a little too far away. Some say the wind carries their names, if you know where to listen. Others say the tide brings them back, just for a moment, before they're gone again. And if you're ever feeling alone, just remember, some places don't forget. Some places remember everything. You ever wonder how a place like Whitley Bay Asylum came to be? It wasn't just a building, it was a whole world of its own, built on the idea that some children just didn't fit. You know, the ones who didn't smile or cry the right way. It started in the early 1900s, when a wealthy philanthropist named Eleanor Whitmore thought she could save the world by locking up the troubled kids. She called it a sanctuary, but it was more like a prison with lace curtains. The asylum wasn't just a place for children, it was a place for control. The staff, mostly women, were told they were doing the right thing, but the truth was, they were trapped in the same kind of silence they tried to silence the children. And then came the whispers, the rumors that some of the children didn't leave the asylum at all, that some of them never left at all. But the truth, that's what we're here to find out. You remember how the air smelled in those old buildings, like dust and something older. It was the kind of smell that clings to your clothes and stays with you long after you've left. The staff started talking about things they couldn't explain: children who weren't there, whispers in hallways, and a nurse who kept seeing a little girl with no face in the mirror. They said it was a mistake, a misfiled record, but the boy had been seen the night before by a guard who claimed he was running through the woods, screaming about a place that wasn't real. No one believed him at first. But then the next boy disappeared, and then the next, and the pattern became clear: these children were never meant to be found. It was like the asylum had its own will, its own purpose, and the children were just the ones it had decided to keep. You remember the girl in the red dress, the one who vanished without a sound? Her name was Alice, and she was just 8 years old when she disappeared from the asylum's east wing. The staff said she ran off, but no one saw her. The nurses claimed she was too quiet and too still, like she was already gone before she left. Years later, they found her doll, buried beneath the floorboards of the east wing. No body, no trace, just a single locket with her name etched inside, and a faded ribbon from her dress, still red as the day she vanished. And to this day, when the wind howls through the broken windows of the asylum, Some say they can hear a child's laughter just once before the silence returns, heavier than ever. I've heard the most chilling accounts from a woman named Lillian, who grew up just a few miles from the old asylum. She claims she used to hear the sound of children's laughter echoing through the woods at night, just before the wind would howl like a banshee. She told me it was like the laughter was coming from inside the asylum, but you could never see anyone. Just the sound, and then silence. Like they were calling for help, but no one was there to answer. One night, she decided to investigate. She followed the sound, only to find a locked gate with a rusted chain. When she tried to open it, the chain snapped and the gate swung open on its own, like it had been waiting for her. She never went back, but she told me the laughter never stopped, and that the sound was always just a little too clear, like the children were trying to say something, but never quite getting the words out. I've heard other accounts too. Some say they saw children running through the halls or heard whispers in the night, but no one ever found the bodies. Just the echoes of something that was never meant to be forgotten. We dug into the old records, and the first thing we found was a list of names. All of them little girls, all of them missing. Some had been admitted for fits or vagueness, others for delinquency, but no one had ever been able to say what happened to them. One name stood out, a girl named Clara. She was admitted in 1923, and the last entry was just a single line, left with her aunt in London. But no one knew who that aunt was, and no one had ever seen a photograph of her. Then we found something even stranger, a letter from Margaret to Clara's mother, written in 1926. It said Clara had run away to the sea, but the letter was unsigned, and the postmark was from a town that no longer exists. We tried to find the town, but it had been swallowed by the sea. The only thing left was a single lighthouse, now crumbling, its light long extinguished, and in the distance, the waves still whisper, just like they did in 1923. You ever notice how some things just vanish? Like the one detail that has never been explained. The name of the girl who wandered off in the night, the one they never found. No records, no body, just silence. The doctors said she was just absent. Though, they didn't think much of it. But the nurses, they whispered, she wasn't gone. She was just waiting for something or someone. And that's the thing about the Whitley Bay. It doesn't just haunt the living. It haunts the stories. The ones that are left behind. The ones that are never told. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you enjoy, take a look at the Kindle Paperwhite e-reader. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. So now you're wondering, aren't you? What happened to her? Why was she never found? And what does that mean for the rest of us? For the ones who are still here, you've heard the stories, but have you ever wondered why the Whitley Bay Asylum's children still haunt the town? Some say the ghosts are just the echoes of a place where hope went to die. Old Mrs. Thompson says the children weren't just patients, they were the ones who never left. She claims they still play in the overgrown gardens, their laughter too bright for the dark. Theories range from spiritual haunting to something far more sinister, but the most unsettling thing is that no one ever finds the bodies. They just disappear. You might think it's just old tales, but ask the local baker. She'll tell you the children still come for the bread. They never take it, they just wait. And so the stories live on, not as warnings, but as whispers. Because sometimes the truth is more terrifying than any ghost. Even now, the Whitley Bay Asylum's name is whispered like a secret between the pages of a forgotten book. No one can say for sure what happened to those children, and that's what makes it so haunting. The police files are sealed, the records lost, and the families left with only questions. It's like the asylum itself is holding its breath, waiting for someone to finally ask the right one. Some say the ghosts still wander the halls, not to scare, but to remind us that the children were real, and their stories deserve to be told. We may never know the truth, but that doesn't mean we should stop looking. The past has a way of lingering, especially when it's been forgotten. And so, the mystery remains waiting, like a lullaby, for someone to finally sing it to sleep. You know, sometimes the hardest part isn't the ghost, it's the silence that follows. The kind that lingers like a secret no one dares to speak. We all have our ghosts, you know. Some just come knocking at the wrong door. Others stay inside, waiting for the right one to open. And sometimes the best way to honor the lost is to let their stories live on quietly, respectfully, and with a touch of wonder. So, as we turn the page, remember this, the truth is often the most terrifying thing we can ever uncover. Now, let's take a walk through the halls of a place where the echoes of the past still breathe. You've heard of the Baskersvilles, but have you ever wondered what it was like to walk the land where the legend began? The moors of Devon, where the wind whispers through the stones like a ghost's sigh. This is no ordinary stretch of land, it's a place where the past clings to the present, where every step feels like you're walking on the edge of a secret that's been buried for centuries. It's said that the hound isn't just a beast, it's a symbol, a warning, a reminder that some legacies are more than just family history. Some are cursed. So, if you're ready to step into the legend, follow me. But be careful, sometimes the moors don't just welcome you, they test you. You remember the story of the Baskervilles, don't you? The great, hulking hound with eyes like molten gold, and a curse that followed the family like a shadow. It all began with a man named Sir Hugo Baskerville, a man with a dark past and a love for the forbidden. Hugo was not just a nobleman, he was a man who dabbled in the occult and had a fascination with the supernatural. One night, he met a woman named Stapleton, a woman who claimed to know the secrets of the earth and the ways of the dead. Together, they devised a plan to summon something ancient, something that had been buried in the moors for centuries. They believed it would grant them power, but they never imagined what they would unleash. The ritual was performed under a blood moon, with incantations and offerings. But the creature they called forth was not a beast of legend, it was a thing that had no name, and it came with a price. Hugo, in his arrogance, tried to claim the creature as his own, but it turned on him. The hound was not a pet, it was a curse, and it was born from the sins of the Baskervilles. And so the legend was born, a tale of betrayal, fear, and the price of hubris. The Baskervilles were doomed to be haunted by their own making, and the hound would never rest until the last of them was gone. You remember the first time you noticed something wasn't quite right. It was just a shadow, but it moved when you blinked, like a ghost in the corner of your eye, watching, waiting. The wind had a habit of whispering through the cracks. Not just wine, but something else. A voice, low and urgent, like a warning from the past. The first real scare came when you found the letter. Not addressed to you, but left on your doorstep. It was old, yellowed, and written in a shaky hand. It spoke of a curse, a family name, and a hound that never sleeps. You laughed it off at first. Just another family legend, like the ones your grandmother told you. But then the dreams started, and in them, the hound was always waiting. You began to notice the house was changing. The walls seemed to breathe, the floorboards creaked like old bones, and the mirror never reflected you quite right. You ever notice how some places hold their secrets tighter than a widow's shawl? That's the feeling I had when I first stepped onto the Baskerville estate. The wind had a way of whispering through the stone like a ghost trying to make itself heard. I was told the last Baskerville died in his own home, but not of natural causes. His body was found in the library, the chair he always sat in, his eyes wide and unblinking. The room was cold, but the air around him felt thick, like it was holding its breath. The family had a secret, one they buried deeper than their own bones. It was said that the hound was more than a legend, it was a curse, a living thing that had been passed down through the bloodline, waiting for the right moment to strike. The last Baskerville's death wasn't the end of the story. His son, young and unwise, tried to claim the estate. He vanished without a trace, and the house has been silent ever since. The only thing left is the echo of his last scream, still trapped in the stone. I remember the way the wind howled through the Baskerville moors, like a dog on the run. One night, a man in a tweed jacket said he saw the hound, not as a beast, but as a mirror. He claimed the hound was not made of fur, but of shadow, and it moved with a purpose that made his bones go cold. He didn't run, he stood there, frozen, as if the creature had already claimed his soul. Another witness said she heard the hound's growl before she saw it. It was a sound like 1,000 dogs, all howling at once, and it came from the earth itself. She said the hound wasn't just in the moors, it was in the trees, the stones, the very air. And it wasn't hunting for food. It was hunting for something else. Some say the hound was a warning, a symbol of the darkness that lurks in the hearts of men. Others say it was a message from the past, a ghost that had never been put to rest. We followed the trail of clues through the damp, winding paths of the Baskerville estate, where the air carried the scent of old stone and the sound of creaking floorboard echoed like a warning. The first strange thing we found was a faded diary, tucked in a hidden compartment of a sideboard, its pages filled with frantic scribbles about a hound that breathes with the wind and waits in the dark. Then came the whispers in the halls, voices too faint to make out, like the wind brushing against the walls, as if someone had never truly left. We found no bodies, no graves, only the faintest traces of a life once lived, like the ghost of a story that refused to die. And in the silence, we began to understand why the legend never faded, because some stories are meant to linger, not be solved. You know, there's one thing about the Baskervilles that's never been explained. Not the hound, not the curse, not even the family tree. Just one little detail that's been left in the shadows, like a forgotten key in the lock of a locked room. It's the way Stapleton vanished. Not the how, not the where, but the asterisk, why asterisk. He had everything to gain and nothing to lose, yet he simply disappeared, like he was never there at all. You see, Stapleton wasn't just a man with a plan, he was a man with a purpose. And that purpose? It wasn't about the hound. It was about something far more personal, far more dangerous, something he kept locked in his own heart. So, when he vanished, it wasn't because he was afraid. It wasn't because he was caught. It was because he had no more need for the hound. He had already done what he came to do. And now, he was free. And that's the one detail that's never been explained. Not because it's too dark, or too dangerous, or too terrible, but because it's still waiting for someone to listen, to look, to remember. You know, some folks say the Baskerville Hound isn't just a ghost, it's a warning. A living thing, tied to the family curse, waiting for the right moment to strike. Others whisper that it's not a dog at all, but a spirit haunted by the guilt of its own creation. A creature born of fear, fed by the stories people tell. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Apple AirPods 2nd generation. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. And then there are those who think the hound isn't real at all, it's a metaphor. A symbol of the madness that runs in the Baskerville bloodline, the price of pride and isolation. Some say the hound is still out there, waiting for someone to step into the wrong shadow, to cross the wrong line, to wake it from its long slumber. And that's why we still tell the story, not just to scare, but to remember, to honor the past and the places that hold its secrets. There are some secrets that refuse to stay buried, and the Baskervilles are one of them. This story is out there, but it's not finished. It's just waiting for the right ears to hear it. Every so often, a new name surfaces, a descendant, a researcher, a curious soul who thinks they've found the missing link. But the trail always ends in silence, like the hound itself has vanished into the mist. And so, the mystery lingers, not in the grave, but in the air. A whisper on the wind, a shadow in the dark, a story that refuses to be told, but waits to be heard. You've heard the tale, but the tale has more to say, and it's waiting for you to listen, just like it's been waiting for over a century. You've felt it, haven't you? That hush in the air, like the world holds its breath just before a storm. It's not the wind, it's something older, something that remembers. There's a kind of silence that doesn't mean nothing's there, it means everything is. And sometimes the hound isn't made of flesh. It's made of memory, of fear, of the things we can't explain. So, as you turn the page, remember this, the hound is still out there, and it's waiting. You've heard of the Titanic, but what about the ship that vanished in a storm so fierce it claimed more lives than any other in history? The SS Mont Blanc *, a name that still whispers of tragedy and mystery. Built in 1905, the Mont Blanc * was a proud French steamship, carrying cargo and passengers across the Atlantic. But on the night of September 26, 1911, it met its fate in the icy waters of the St. Lawrence River. The Mont Blanc * wasn't just a ship, it was a symbol of hope and industry. But that night, a collision with another vessel and a sudden explosion turned it into a ghost of its former self. Now, decades later, the Mont Blanc * is more than a historical footnote. It's a haunting reminder of the fragility of life and the secrets that linger beneath the waves. And though the ship is gone, some say its spirit still lingers in the mist, waiting for the right moment to tell its story. You know, the SS Mont Blanc * wasn't just any ship. It was a French luxury liner, the kind of place where you expect to hear jazz and see Parisian elegance, not the kind of place that would end up in the middle of a war. Built in 1909, it was one of the most advanced vessels of its time, with electric lights and even a swimming pool, though the pool was for the wealthy, not the crew. You might think a troopship would be safe, but the Mont Blanc * was carrying something far more dangerous, 2,000 tons of explosives, part of a secret mission to bomb the German fleet. And that's where the real story begins. You see, the Mont Blanc * wasn't just a ship, it was a ticking time bomb, and the sea had no idea it was coming. You remember the sound of the ship's whistle, sharp and clear, like a lullaby gone wrong. It wasn't just the wind, something in the air had changed, like the sky itself had held its breath. The crew noticed the compasses spinning wildly, as though the ship had been caught in a magnetic storm. They joked about the North Pole being nearby, but the joke didn't last long. The radio crackled with static, voices faint and distorted, as though someone was speaking from the bottom of the ocean. They couldn't tell if it was the wind or something else trying to get through. The last thing they saw before the explosion was the sky turning a sickly shade of green, and the water rising not just from the sea, but from below. You ever wonder what happens when a ship full of explosives meets the sea in the dead of night? The asterisk Mont Blanc asterisk wasn't just a ship, it was a ticking time bomb, loaded with munitions and a crew who had no idea they were about to become ghosts. On the night of December 6, 1917, the asterisk Mont Blanc asterisk was heading to New York when it collided with another ship, the asterisk IMO asterisk. The collision wasn't just a scrape, it was a catastrophic spark, and the explosives on board detonated with a force that shook the very sea. The explosion was so powerful that it caused a shockwave that traveled miles, and the damage was so great that the ship's remains were never found. Some say the sea still remembers the asterisk Mont Blanc asterisk, that it lingers in the depths, a silent, unspoken warning. And now, as you listen to this story, you might wonder, what if the asterisk Mont Blanc asterisk isn't just a memory? What if it's still out there, waiting to remind the world that some ships never make it home? Some survivors say they saw a ghostly ship, all white and shimmering, rising from the water like a mirage. Others swear it was just a trick of the light, but they all agree on one thing: it was there. A sailor named John Mowbray claimed he saw the ghost ship circling the asterisk Mont Blanc asterisk like a vulture, its sails tattered and its masts leaning in a way that made no sense. A nurse on board later told a reporter that she saw a figure in the water, waving her arms like she was trying to pull someone toward shore. She didn't know if it was a survivor or a spirit. She said the figure looked just like the women who had died that night. Some say she was a ghost trying to save those who had already been lost. Others say she was a warning. These stories don't prove anything, but they do remind us that even in the darkest hours, there's something lingering, something that won't let go. The investigation started with a simple question: what happened to the SS Mont Blanc? We combed through old logs, crew testimonies, and weather reports, but the answers were as murky as the sea that claimed her. One officer claimed he saw a ghostly figure in the mist, a woman in a white dress standing at the bow. Others said they heard a woman's laughter echoing through the ship's corridors. No one believed them at first until the evidence began to pile up. The deeper we dug, the more the story unraveled. A missing passenger, a sealed-off cabin, and a cargo of explosives that had never been accounted for. It wasn't just a ship that sank, it was a secret that refused to stay buried. Some say the ship didn't drown, it was murdered, and that the ghost of the woman in white is still waiting for her story to be told. But in the end, the truth was never the same as the legend. You know, there's one thing about the asterisk Mont Blanc asterisk that's always stayed with me. The one detail no one can explain, no matter how hard they've tried. It's not the explosion, not the fire, not even the tragedy of 3,000 souls lost. It's the way the ship just vanished. No wreckage, no bodies, just silence. Some say the explosion was so powerful, it wiped the ship from the sea floor. Others say the fire was too hot, too fast. But no one can say for sure what happened to the ship's name, the asterisk Mont Blanc asterisk. You ever wonder what happens to a ship when it's gone too far, too fast? What if the sea just forgets it ever existed? Maybe that's why the asterisk Mont Blanc asterisk still haunts us. Because even now, it's not gone. It's just waiting to be found. You know, some folks say the water remembers, that the Mont Blanc's ghosts still dance beneath the waves, singing in a language no one can quite understand. I've heard whispers of a lullaby, a haunting melody that pulls the lost toward the dark. Others say the ship didn't just sink, it vanished, swallowed by the deep in a blink. And that the survivors? They never spoke of what they saw, just that the sea was alive, and it had a name. There's even a tale that the ship's bell still rings on stormy nights. It sounds so faint you'd think it was just the wind. But if you listen closely, you might hear it calling for help, no one knows who or why. And then there's the most unsettling one of all, that the Mont Blanc isn't just a ship, it's a presence, a memory, a warning. And if you ever find yourself near the coast on a quiet evening, you might just hear it too. You know, sometimes the most haunting stories aren't about what happened, but what never did. And the SS asterisk Mont Blanc asterisk is one of those. A ship that vanished, a tragedy that's still whispering through the waves. No bodies were ever found, no survivors, just a silence that has lingered for over a century. Some say the sea remembers, others say the sea is just waiting for someone to listen. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Fire TV Stick 4K streaming device. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. Every clue leads to more questions. Every answer unravels another thread. It's like the sea itself is holding its breath, waiting for someone to ask the right question. And here we are, still trying to make sense of it. Still wondering if the asterisk Mont Blanc asterisk is a warning, or just a whisper in the dark. But one thing's certain, the sea never forgets. You know, sometimes the silence is the loudest sound. And sometimes, the water remembers what the air forgets. The Mont Blanc didn't just vanish, it was swallowed whole, like a secret too heavy to hold. And if you ever feel the need to chase a story, don't be the one to chase it down. Some truths are better left in the dark. Now, before we move on, let's take one last breath and remember some stories don't end. They just wait for the right moment to begin again. You've heard of the Titanic, but what about the SS Mont Blanc? A ship that vanished in 1942, carrying a cargo so dangerous it could end the world. You ever wonder what secrets sink with the sea? This wasn't just any ship, it was a French luxury liner turned wartime vessel, loaded with 2,000 tons of TNT, the kind of cargo that would make even the most seasoned sailors uneasy. You ever think about how dangerous it is to carry a bomb across the Atlantic? The ship was found years later, half sunken in the icy waters near Nova Scotia. But the mystery remains. Why did it disappear? What happened to its crew? And what secrets lie buried beneath the waves? Some say the Mont Blanc is haunted, that the spirits of its doomed crew still wander the ocean, waiting for the day the truth will rise from the depths. You ever wonder if the sea keeps secrets and if it ever tells them? You see, the SS Mont Blanc wasn't just any ship. It was a French luxury liner, a floating palace of silk and steam, sailing the Atlantic in the early 1900s. And then, one night, it met its fate in a storm so fierce it became legend. Its last voyage was meant to be a quiet, elegant journey to New York, but the storm that followed was no ordinary squall. It was a tempest of wind and water, with waves that rose like mountains. Only 30 of the 3,000 souls aboard survived. The rest were lost to the sea, their names now part of a tragedy that lingers in the water like a ghost. And the Mont Blanc story didn't end there. In the years that followed, the wreckage of the Mont Blanc became a place of eerie fascination. The sea, once a grave, now whispers secrets to those who dare to listen, and the spirits of those lost still wait for answers. You know how sometimes, even the most seasoned sailors start to question the sea? Well, the Mont Blanc was heading east, but the wind began to shift, like the ocean itself was holding its breath. The crew noticed the compass spinning wildly, and the radio crackled with static. No one could tell if it was a storm or something worse. It was as if the ship had been pulled into a silent, unseen tide. The radio crackled again, but now it wasn't static, it was voices, low and urgent, speaking in a language none of the crew understood. It was like the ship was being whispered to by something that had been waiting a long time. Even the most stoic sailors began to exchange uneasy glances. You could see it in their eyes, the same doubt that creeps in when you're sure you're dreaming, but the dream keeps getting more real. It was the first time they all realized they were not just sailing into the unknown. They were sailing into something that had been waiting for them, and it wasn't going to let them go so easily. You see it now, don't you? The ship, still, and the water, moving. The moment everything changed, the moment the silence broke. It was 1942. The war was at its peak, and the ship was carrying something far more dangerous than fuel. The survivors remember the heat, the screams, the way the ship sank like a dream, dragging everything with it into the dark. But what was truly lost that day? The cargo, the lives, or the secrets that were never meant to be found again? And now, as the currents whisper and the tides pull, the question is, do the drowned still hold their secrets, or have they been lost to time? I've read accounts from survivors who claim the ship didn't just explode, it screamed as it went down. Some say the sound was like 1,000 broken violins, or a child's cry echoing through the dark. One man swore he heard voices in the water, calling out in French, as if the ship itself was trying to warn them. Others say they saw lights flickering under the waves, like lanterns in a ghostly procession. Some survivors say they saw the ship's lights still burning when it disappeared, like it was being pulled under by something invisible, something alive. Even the most rational minds among them couldn't explain what they saw. One woman said she felt the ship pulling her down, as if it had a will of its own. And then there's the question no one dares ask, what if the ship didn't just sink, but drown with its secrets, and the water is still holding on to them? The investigation began with a simple request, to look into the strange radio signals coming from the wreckage site. We found old logs and maps, but what we didn't expect was the silence that followed every question. The deeper we dug, the more the records seemed to vanish. One moment the ship was there, the next it was erased from history, as if someone had wanted to forget it entirely. Then there were the objects that didn't belong to the time. A pocket watch with no hands, a ring with no name, a piece of fabric that smelled like salt, and something older, something forgotten. The most unsettling find was a diary Not just any diary, but one written in the first person, describing the last moments of the ship as if the writer had been there and had survived. The last entry ended abruptly with the words, "They're still here. Don't look back." And then, nothing. No date, no signature, just silence, like the ship had never existed at all. You know, there's one thing about the Mont Blanc that still haunts me. No one ever explains why the ship was carrying so many explosives. It's like they just packed them in and said, "Let's go." The official story says it was a cargo ship, but the list of items they carried, it reads like a war room. And no one ever said why they were so eager to cross the Atlantic with that kind of firepower. No one ever saw the explosion. No one ever saw the ship go down. Just a flash of light, and then silence. Like the ocean swallowed it whole, and the world just forgot. So, if you're listening, and you ever wondered about the Mont Blanc maybe you're not just hearing a ghost. Maybe you're hearing a question that's been waiting for someone to ask. Some say the Mont Blanc wasn't just a ship, it was a cursed thing. A vessel that carried more than just cargo. They whisper that it took souls with it and that the sea still remembers. The locals don't talk about the explosion much. They talk about the stories that came after, of sailors disappearing, of voices calling from the deep, of a ship that never should have made it home. There's a theory, you know, that the ship wasn't just lost, it was a gateway. That the explosion wasn't an accident, but an invitation. That the sea still waits for those who came before. And then there's the legend of the ghosts, like those who swear they've seen a beacon in the night, guiding ships toward the rocks, only to vanish when they get too close. Some say the best way to honor the lost is to listen, to remember, to keep their stories alive, not just as ghosts, but as part of our history, our shared mystery. And so, we return to the unresolved mystery that lingers to this day. No bodies were found, no survivors came forward, and the truth remains buried beneath the waves. Theories swirl like the storm clouds that night. Some say it was sabotage, others a tragic accident, but none can explain the silence that followed. To this day, the Mont Blanc's final moments are a riddle wrapped in a storm, and the truth has yet to rise from the depths. We may never know what happened that night, but the story remains, telling us that some secrets are meant to stay beneath the waves. You've heard the whispers of the sea, felt the weight of history, and now, as the last light fades, I wonder what lingers in the quiet after the storm. The Mont Blanc isn't just a ship, it's a memory, a ghost in the tide, waiting for the right moment to surface again. But for now, let the sea carry the stories, and let the silence speak for the ones we've lost. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Apple AirPods 2nd generation. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. Stay warm, stay curious, and I'll see you when the next story begins. You've heard of the Titanic, but have you ever wondered what happened to the ship that sank with the bomb on board? The Mont Blanc a French luxury liner, bound for New York in 1942, carrying a cargo that would change the course of history. It wasn't just a ship, it was a floating warship, loaded with over 5,000 tons of TNT and other explosives, the kind of cargo that could turn a quiet sea into a battlefield. The explosion was so powerful, it was felt miles away. It tore through the ship like a knife through butter, and though the Mont Blanc was never officially declared a ghost ship, its legacy has lingered in the waters of Halifax ever since. Now, decades later, the Mont Blanc is more than a tragedy, it's a mystery, a whisper beneath the waves, and a story that still hasn't been fully told. You know, it's funny how the sea can remember things we forget. The Mont Blanc wasn't just a ship, it was a giant, floating warehouse of explosives, and it was full of people who didn't know they were about to become part of history. Built in 1918, it was meant for cargo, but the war had other plans. The British took it over, loaded it with dynamite, and sent it on a mission that would make it the most expensive shipwreck in history. The night it went down, the Mont Blanc was carrying 2,940 tons of TNT, enough to level a city, and it was heading for Halifax, Canada, where the plan was to detonate it in a controlled blast to keep the munitions out of enemy hands. But the explosion wasn't controlled. A spark from a nearby ship ignited the cargo, and in seconds, the Mont Blanc turned into a fireball. The blast destroyed the city, killed over 1,800 people, and left the sea with a haunting memory of that night. And so, the Mont Blanc became more than a ship, it became a ghost, a warning, and a story that the sea refuses to let go of. You can almost hear it in the waves, don't you think? You know how sometimes the air just feels different, like it's holding its breath? That's what I felt that day, standing on the docks, watching the Mont Blanc steam away. It was peaceful, but there was something in the way the water shimmered like it was holding its own secret. I asked the captain if there was anything strange about the ship. He just smiled and said, "She's a fine vessel, but she's not like the others." I didn't think much of it then, but that smile lingered in my mind like a ghost. Then came the whispers. Sailors told me the Mont Blanc didn't just carry cargo, it carried stories. Some said it was cursed, others that it was haunted by the souls of the ones it had taken. But I was too busy planning my trip to listen. I dismissed it all as sailors' tales, the kind that make you feel like you're missing something. But as I boarded the ship, I noticed the way the crew avoided my gaze, and how the air seemed to grow colder the deeper we sailed. And then, as we passed the last lighthouse, the wind shifted. It wasn't just the wind, it was something else, something that made the hair on my neck stand up and the silence feel too heavy for the air to hold. That's when I knew something was wrong, not just with the ship, but with the sea itself. And I had a feeling I wasn't the only one who had noticed. You know, the thing about the Mont Blanc isn't just the explosion. It's what happened after the way the survivors kept whispering about the ones who never made it. Some say they were still alive, trapped in the ship's belly, waiting for someone to listen. They didn't just vanish. They disappeared into the depths, swallowed by a storm that no one could explain. The last radio transmission was a single word, help, and then silence. Silence that lasted for decades. The mystery isn't just where they went. It's why they went. Why they followed a ship that was never meant to be sailed. Some say it was a mistake. Others say it was a choice. But no one knows what they found in the deep. And now, even after all these years, the Mont Blanc still waits. Waiting for someone to remember. Waiting for someone to ask the right questions. Because the sea doesn't forget. And neither do the ones it took. I've heard from a former sailor who claims he saw the Mont Blanc's ghost in the fog off the coast of Nova Scotia, all flickering lights and a sorrowful wail that made the crew turn back. Another witness said they heard the ship's whistle echo through the night, so clear it felt like the ship was still alive, not just a memory. One woman told me she saw a figure in the water, dressed in a 1910 sailor's uniform, floating like a doll, eyes fixed on the shore with a look of unspeakable longing. She said the figure didn't move, just stared, as if waiting for someone to finally understand what it had lost. And then there's the sailor who swore the ship's bell still rings at dawn, not once but twice, like a warning from the past that no one wants to hear. We followed the trail of old records and whispered names, piecing together a story that felt like a dream half remembered. The deeper we dug, the more the past seemed to whisper back. Every document we found had a strange pattern, names repeated, dates that didn't quite match, and a sense that someone had tried to erase the truth. Then there were the photographs, people in the same place, the same time, but their faces were missing, like the camera had blinked or something had been deliberately erased. One of the researchers, a retired librarian with a sharp eye for detail, said it was like the past was trying to protect itself. And maybe it was. We kept finding more, but the more we found, the more we wondered what were we uncovering, and what were we disturbing. You've heard the names, you've seen the maps, but there's one thing that's always been left out of the story: the exact moment the ship vanished. What happened in that final second? No one knows, not even the crew who were there. Some say the explosion was too clean, too sudden. Others say the ship just disappeared. But the truth, it's been buried with the ship, hidden in the silence of the deep. And no one's ever come close to finding it. You think you know the story of the Mont Blanc but what if there's more to it? What if the ship wasn't just lost to war, but to something older? Something that still waits beneath the waves, whispering to those who listen. That's the thing about secrets, isn't it? They don't just disappear. They linger, they wait, and sometimes they come looking for you. You've heard the stories of the Mont Blanc but what about the people who still chase the truth? Some say the town near Halifax has a secret club of locals who gather every October to share the old tales, like they're keeping the spirits alive. They talk about the cargo hold, the survivors, the missing men. Some even say the ship never really sank. Others claim the Mont Blanc is still out there, floating like a ghost, waiting for the right storm to bring it back. There's even a local who says he saw a figure on the water one stormy night, a man in a naval uniform, standing at the bow watching the shore. He never said a word, just stared, like he was waiting for someone to finally come looking. And some say the real horror isn't the ship or the tragedy, it's the silence. That those who were on board, who survived, who walked away, they're the ones who still carry the weight of what happened, and they never speak of it. So you see, the Mont Blanc isn't just a ship, it's a mirror. And sometimes, the truth is the most terrifying thing you'll ever see reflected back at you. And so, the story of the SS Mont Blanc fades into the quiet hum of the Atlantic, leaving behind more questions than answers. What became of those souls, lost in a storm they never saw coming? No bodies were found, no wreckage, no records of what happened that night. Just a ghostly echo of a ship that vanished, like a whisper in the dark. You know, sometimes the most haunting stories are the ones that never quite end, like the SS Mont Blanc still whispering in the depths of the sea, waiting for someone to listen. It's not just the tragedy of that night, but the silence that follows. The silence of the lost, the silence of the sea, and the silence of those who still hear them. And maybe, just maybe, the stories we tell aren't just for the ghosts, they're for us, too. A way to remember, to feel, to hold on to something real in a world that's too big and too quiet. So I'll leave you with this: the sea remembers. And if you ever feel the cold, the weight, the pull, maybe it's not just the tide. Maybe it's something else calling. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Kindle Paperwhite e-reader. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. You've heard the names, but have you ever wondered what it was like to stand where history's most elusive figure once stood? The Pacific Ocean, vast and unrelenting, hides more than just waves and wind. This is where Amelia Earhart vanished, and the mystery has grown like the tides never receding, always pulling you deeper into the unknown. Imagine standing where she might have landed, where the land meets the sea, and the wind carries not just the sound of waves, but the whispers of a woman who never made it home. We don't know what happened here, but we know the ocean has its own way of keeping secrets, and sometimes it's the silence that speaks loudest. So, come with me now. Let's walk the shore where the past and present meet, and where the mystery of Amelia Earhart begins to take shape. You know, the story of Amelia Earhart begins with a woman who dared to dream of flying across the world. She wasn't just a pilot, she was a trailblazer, a symbol of courage, and a figure who captured the hearts of millions. But even the bravest souls can have their legacy shrouded in mystery. She wasn't just flying for glory, she was flying for freedom, for women, and for the future. Her 1932 flight to Europe made her the first woman to solo cross the Atlantic, and she was only getting started. But her next adventure would change everything. The final transmission from the plane was a cryptic message: "We are flying around the world," and then silence. No distress call, no wreckage, just a void where a plane should have been. It was as if the world had simply vanished. The search for Amelia Earhart and her plane turned into a global obsession. People from all walks of life were drawn to the mystery, some hoping to find her, others hoping to be her. And yet, after decades of searching, the truth still eludes us. So here we are, still trying to piece together the story of a woman who reached for the skies and left us with more questions than answers. What happened to Amelia Earhart? Was she lost at sea, or did she make it to safety? The truth may never be found, but the mystery lives on. You remember the last time we spoke, didn't you? We were just beginning to piece together the mystery of Amelia's final flight. But now, I've got a feeling we're getting closer to the edges of something darker. The first real sign that something was wrong came in the form of a letter. Not from Amelia, but from someone who claimed to have seen her in the skies that last day. People started asking questions, and the answers they got only deepened the mystery. Who was flying with her? What did they know? And why did no one speak of it afterward? It's like the world decided to forget. But some of us remember, and we're not ready to let go. We're still waiting for someone to tell us what really happened that day. You remember the day the world held its breath, and the sky turned silent. Amelia Earhart, the daring aviatrix, vanished over the vast Pacific, leaving behind only a whisper of mystery and the weight of 1,000 unanswered questions. The last known transmission was a coded message, a faint crackle of static, and a voice that seemed to fade into the wind like a promise left unfulfilled. The world waited for answers, but the ocean swallowed the secrets, and the sky remained a silent witness to a woman who dared to fly where no one else dared to dream. And so, Amelia Earhart disappeared, not in a crash, not in a grave, but in the vast, unknowable blue, where the dreams of the brave often meet the end of the world. I've read accounts from people who swear they saw a figure in the sky, just before the last radio transmission. They said it looked like a woman dressed in a flight suit, flying alone. One man claimed he saw her plane go down in the ocean, but the waves were so rough, he couldn't tell if it was a crash or just a plane disappearing into the blue. Another witness, a farmer in Hawaii, said he saw a woman in the sky with a parachute drifting down like a leaf. He didn't know who she was, but he'll never forget her face. There are stories of people who saw her plane land on a remote island, but no one could find the wreckage. Some say she's still there, waiting for the right moment to return. And then there are the ones who say they saw her in a dream, flying over the Pacific, her eyes searching for something she could never find. They dug deep, past the headlines, past the myths, and found something unsettling. Files sealed for decades, letters that didn't add up, and a trail that led to the edges of the known world. One document mentioned a radio transmission, faint but clear. "We are lost." But no one knew where it came from, and no one ever confirmed it. It was like a whisper in a storm. Investigators found no physical evidence, no wreckage, no body, only a pattern of silence, like the world had forgotten how to listen. And then, the strangest thing, a series of old photographs, Polaroids, almost forgotten, showing a woman in a cockpit, smiling, her eyes distant, as if looking through the lens at something unseen. They tried to explain it all away, but the questions lingered. What if the silence wasn't an absence, but a presence? What if Amelia wasn't lost, but waiting? You know, the one thing that still haunts me is the missing compass. It was the last piece of her plane, the one thing that should have pointed her home, and it vanished without a trace. They say it was a simple mechanical failure, but the compass didn't break, it just disappeared, like it had been plucked from the sky by something unseen. And here's the thing, it wasn't just the compass that went missing. It was the last piece of a puzzle that should have fit perfectly, and now we're left with a silence that speaks louder than any explanation. So, what do you think? Did it go down with her, or was it taken? And if it was taken, by who or what do you suppose it was taken by? You know, some folks say Amelia's not gone at all, but just lost in the sky, like a ghost in the clouds. They whisper she's still out there, waiting for the right pilot to find her. Others believe she ended up on a remote island, hidden from the world, living out her days in quiet solitude. They say you can still hear her laughter echoing through the trees if you listen closely. And then there are those who believe she never left the island at all, that she was taken by the sea, by the moon, by something that doesn't belong to this world. So what do you think? Was she lost, or was she always meant to be found? The sky still holds its secrets, and the wind still carries her name. And so, we stand at the edge of the unknown, where history and myth blur, and the truth remains just out of reach. The world is full of mysteries, but few are as enduring as Amelia's final flight. Every new clue only deepens the enigma, not because it reveals more, but because it raises more questions. Was she lost at sea, or did she vanish into the unknown, as she once dreamed? We may never know for sure, but that's part of the magic. The mystery of Amelia Earhart is not just about her disappearance, it's about the courage, the curiosity, and the endless reach of the human spirit. So, as we close this chapter, we leave you with a question. What if the greatest mystery of all is not what happened to Amelia, but what she chose to do with the sky? Until we meet again, keep the stories alive, and may the winds always carry you where you're meant to go. You've heard the whispers of Amelia, but have you ever wondered what she might be thinking now, floating above the Pacific? Or perhaps, what she has left behind in the silence? Sometimes, the most haunting stories aren't the ones we solve, but the ones that linger in the quiet spaces between the facts. But don't worry, there's more where this came from. A new tale waits just beyond the next turn in the road. Stay with me. The stories are just beginning. You've heard of the Titanic, of course, but have you ever wondered what it felt like to be on that ship as it slipped into the icy blackness? Imagine the grandeur of the world's most luxurious liner, now a ghost drifting through the Atlantic, still carrying the echoes of its final night. The night of April 15, 1912, was anything but ordinary. Passengers were dressed in their finest, sipping champagne and laughing, unaware that the sea would soon steal their lives. It was the kind of night that feels more like a dream than reality. And now, decades later, the Titanic is more than just a ship, it's a legend, a place where the past refuses to fade. Some say the ghosts still linger in the ballrooms and corridors, waiting for someone to remember their final journey. So, what if we could step aboard once more, not as passengers, but as listeners, letting the story of the Titanic unfold slowly, like the waves that once claimed it? You know, the Titanic's story began with a promise of luxury, safety, and a new era of travel. But it was also a promise to the ocean, a promise to sail through the icy waters of the North Atlantic. Quick word from our sponsor. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy, take a look at the Apple AirPods 2nd generation. There's a link and a QR code on screen right now, and in the description below. Alright, back to it. It was built by the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast, a place where dreams were made of steel and ambition. The workers, many of them Irish immigrants, toiled for years to bring this dream to life. The ship's designer, Thomas Andrews, was a man of both genius and tragedy. He knew the Titanic was unsinkable until the night it wasn't. And then there was the White Star Line, the company that made the Titanic a symbol of progress. They sold tickets for a price that made people think they were buying more than just a seat, they were buying a future. The people who boarded were as diverse as the world itself. Some came to escape the old country, others to make a fortune, and many just wanted to see the world until the sea took them all. And so the Titanic set sail, a ship of dreams with the ocean as its final audience. It was a story of human ambition, of hope and hubris, and of the price we sometimes pay for believing in the future. Before you go, if you enjoyed this, please give it a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And tell us in the comments what you'd like us to make next. We read every single one. Thank you so much for watching. Comment this emoji if you made it to the end.